Reborn, I hid my $200 million lottery win from my family and watched them fall for my sister's fake CO boyfriend's trap. She died with nothing, no money, no family, no future. Just the walls of a rented room above a laundromat and a water stain on the ceiling shaped like the state where she had lost everything. Evelyn Vance lived her first life as the daughter no one listened to, the sister no one took seriously, the woman who watched her family fall apart and could not convince a single person to believe her. Then she woke up on the morning of her sister's engagement party with $200 million in her pocket and the memory of every betrayal still burning in her chest. She knew exactly what her future brother-in-law was planning. She knew the shell companies, the secret accounts, the timeline of destruction he had written like a business plan, and she made a choice that would define her second life. She would not warn them, she would let them fall, and when they hit the ground, she would be the only one left standing holding the safety net they never knew existed. Welcome to Warm Era. Today's story is about a woman who lost everything, died alone, and woke up with a second chance and a $200 million secret. This is the story of how Evelyn Vance took back her life, one careful step at a time, and found love in the last place she thought to look. If you believe in second chances, hit subscribe. Warm Era brings you a new story of love, revenge, and redemption every week. She sat up slowly, her phone was on the nightstand. The date glowed in the gray morning light, July 14, 2 years before her death, 3 days after a lottery drawing she had memorized the numbers of in her previous life. Because she had stared at the winning ticket on a convenience store screen, a ticket she hadn't bought, thinking if I had just picked those numbers I could have saved myself. In her previous life she bought no ticket. In this life she had walked into a gas station on July 11th, bought a $5 quick pick and walked out with the numbers she'd memorized while dying, $200 million. She told no one. Evelyn swung her legs out of bed. The floorboards creaked in the same spot they had creaked since she was 12. She walked to the window and pushed the curtain aside. The driveway was empty. Good, she had time in her previous life. Today was the morning of Vanessa's engagement party. In her previous life, she had spent this morning picking out a dress, practicing her smile, pretending she was happy for her little sister and the charming CEO who had swept Vanessa off her feet in 6 months, Marcus Sterling. She had trusted him, everyone had. Her father called him a sharp young man, her mother called him the son I never had. Vanessa called him the love of her life, Evelyn called him the man who had stolen everything in her previous life. Marcus had married Vanessa, taken a seat on the Vance Holdings board, and bled the company dry within 18 months. Her father's signature appeared on transfer documents he didn't remember signing. Shell companies swallowed assets whole. When Evelyn tried to warn her family, her mother told her she was jealous. Her father told her to stay out of business matters she didn't understand. Vanessa stopped speaking to her. By the time anyone believed her, Marcus was gone. $200 million of Vance Holdings equity was gone. The company collapsed. Her father had a heart attack, her mother sold the house, Vanessa disappeared, and Evelyn spent her last 2 years in a rented room above a laundromat, doing data entry for a marketing firm that paid under the table, watching her family scatter like ash. She had died alone. It took 3 days for anyone to find her. Evelyn pressed her palm flat against the window glass. The coolness seeped into her skin. In this life, she was 28 years old. She had $200 million no one knew about, and she had a front row seat to a trap she had already watched close once. This time, she wasn't going to warn anyone. This time, she was going to let them walk into it. And when the trap snapped shut, when Marcus showed them exactly who he was, she would be the one holding the keys to everyone's survival. The thought should have felt cold. It felt like oxygen. She dressed in jeans and an old sweater. No makeup, no pretense. The Evelyn who had spent 2 hours picking out the perfect dress for Vanessa's engagement party was dead, literally. She grabbed her keys and walked out the back door. The bank was on the corner of 5th and Main, the same branch where her father had opened her first savings account when she was 7. The teller smiled and asked how she could help. Evelyn slid the paperwork across the counter. The documents her lawyer had prepared 2 days ago, before the lottery money had even cleared. Alder Lane Holdings. The teller read, business account. I'll be the sole signatory. The teller processed the forms. Evelyn signed her name on the line, the same hand that had signed nothing in her previous life, because Marcus had handled all the finances, because her father had handled everything, because everyone had treated her like she couldn't handle anything. Signed the account opening documents without a tremor. She was halfway through the signature when the door opened. A man walked in, dark suit, no tie, brown eyes that swept the lobby like a security camera. Efficient, unhurried, missing nothing. He was not a customer, he was not a banker. He was the kind of person who walked into a room and calculated the exits before he chose a seat. Their eyes met across the roped queue 3 seconds, maybe 4. He nodded once, a professional acknowledgement. Then he turned toward the business banking desk and pulled out a leather wallet with a federal ID badge. Evelyn turned back to her paperwork. Her hand was steady, her pulse was not. The name on the ID badge had been visible for exactly 1 second. She had read it, Chan Financial Crimes Task Force. In her previous life, Alex Chan had never appeared, not once, not in any bank lobby, not at any engagement party, not at any board meeting. She had died without ever learning his name, so why was he here now? She folded the account documents into her bag, thanked the teller, and walked out. She did not look back, but she felt his gaze on the back of her neck like a single point of light. She drove to the coffee shop 2 blocks from her parents' house, the same one she had gone to every morning in her previous life. Back when she had a routine and a future she believed in. The barista recognized her. "Haven't seen you in a while, Ev. Been busy." She took her coffee to a corner table and pulled out her phone. The lottery money had cleared. She had sent 2 transfers already, one to the lawyer who had set up the holding company, one to the private investigator she had hired with a $50,000 retainer, Sarah Okonkwo, ex-FBI. Now a PI who specialized in financial fraud cases. Evelyn had found her name in her previous life 3 months before her death, when she had finally scraped together enough money to start investigating what Marcus had done. Sarah had sent her a report that arrived 5 days after she died. In this life, Sarah had accepted the retainer within an hour. The first preliminary report was due in 2 weeks. Evelyn sipped her coffee, the bitterness grounded her. She had a plan. It was a good plan. It involved letting her family make every mistake they had made in her previous life, because trying to stop them had cost her everything, and staying silent was the only way to make them see what she had seen. When they hit the bottom she had hit, she would be there, not as the daughter they ignored, as the person holding the safety net they hadn't known existed. The door chimed. She looked up. The man from the bank walked in, dark suit, no tie. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and leaned against the counter while he waited. His eyes found her. Again, not a coincidence this time. He walked over. "Evelyn Vance." She kept her face neutral. "Do I know you?" He set his coffee on the table but didn't sit. "Alex Chan, I'm a consultant reviewing compliance at Sterling Capital." Of course he was. Marcus Sterling's company. The man who had just appeared in a bank lobby while she was opening a blind holding company account was connected to the man who would steal everything from her family. "I don't work for Sterling Capital," she said. "I know. You're Richard Vance's daughter. Then you know I don't have anything to do with the company." "That's what I'm trying to understand." He tilted his head slightly. The movement was small, but it changed the quality of his attention. "Your name appears in a couple of records near Sterling Capital's accounts, not as a signatory, not as a beneficiary, just nearby, and you just opened a new holding company account." "I opened a business account," she said. "People do that." "They do." He didn't smile. "I'm sure it's nothing, but I'd appreciate it if you gave me a call if anything unusual crosses your desk." He slid a card across the table, his contact info, no agency logo, just his name and a phone number. Evelyn picked it up. "I'll keep that in mind." "Thank you." He picked up his coffee. "Have a good day, Ms. Vance." He left. She watched him go through the window. He walked east, toward the financial district, toward Sterling Capital's office, toward Marcus. In her previous life, Alex Chan had not existed. She had died without knowing there was someone investigating Marcus Sterling, which meant the investigation had never led anywhere. In her previous life, Marcus had gotten away clean. Or in her previous life, she had never been in that bank lobby. She had never opened a holding company account. She had never bought a winning lottery ticket. She had done nothing different. And because she had done nothing different, the investigation had failed. This time she had changed something. This time Alex Chan had found her. Evelyn folded the card into her pocket and finished her coffee. She didn't know yet whether Alex Chan was an ally, a threat, or a variable she hadn't accounted for. But she knew one thing: in her previous life, the only person who had tried to catch Marcus Sterling had been her. And she had died alone. In this life, someone else was on the same trail. Whether that made her safer or more exposed was a question she didn't have time to answer. She had an engagement party to attend, a sister to watch, a trap to let close. She paid for her coffee and walked out. The party started at 7. Evelyn arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes early, in a charcoal dress she had found at the back of her closet. Unremarkable. She wanted to be invisible. The house was transformed, white flowers everywhere, string lights in the backyard, Caterers in black vests passed trays of champagne. Her mother was in the kitchen, directing the flower arrangements. With military precision, her father was in the study, pouring whiskey for Marcus's business associates, and Vanessa was on the staircase, radiant in a pale gold dress, ring finger already sporting a diamond that caught the light like a threat. "You're early," Vanessa said. Her voice was bright, but there was an edge underneath. There was always an edge with Vanessa, the unspoken competition that had existed since they were children. "Thought you might need help. Mom's been handling everything. You know how she is, she's been planning this since I told her about Marcus." Evelyn had known Marcus for a total of 23 words in her previous life. In this life, she had known him for 0. She had avoided every dinner, every introduction. She had told her mother she was working on a project. Whenever Marcus was mentioned, it was the only lie she had told this time, and it was the truest thing she had said in either life. "Where is he?" Evelyn asked. "Upstairs on a call, business thing." Vanessa waved her hand. "He's always working, that's how he built his company. You'd know what that's like if you ever started something." The jab was reflexive. Vanessa didn't mean it. In her previous life, Evelyn had flinched at this kind of casual cruelty from her sister. In this life, she watched it land like a leaf on still water. "Maybe I will," Evelyn said. Vanessa laughed. "Right, you and your project." She walked away, gold dress flowing, diamond flashing. Evelyn watched her go and felt nothing. That was the strangest part. In her previous life, she had loved her sister. In this life, she still did, but the love had been overwritten by something else. A knowledge that no amount of love would stop what was coming. She took a glass of champagne from a passing tray and found a corner near the back windows. From here, she could see the entire room, her mother greeting guests, her father shaking hands, Vanessa posing for photos, ring extended, smile perfect, and then Marcus. Sterling walked down the stairs. He was exactly as she remembered, 6 feet, broad shoulders, a face that belonged on a magazine cover, dark hair swept back, a watch on his wrist that cost more than most people's cars. He moved through the room like he owned it, because in his mind, he already did. He found Vanessa, kissed her cheek, and said something that made her laugh. Evelyn watched. The champagne glass in her hand was cold. She did not drink from it. She held it like a prop, like a shield. While she watched the man who had killed her circulate among her family like a wolf who had learned to smile, her mother embraced him. Her father clapped him on the shoulder. Vanessa leaned into his side like he was the only solid thing in the room. None of them looked at Evelyn. None of them noticed she was standing in the corner, watching them fall for the same trap she had watched close once before. She touched the card in her pocket. Alex Chan. Financial crimes. In her previous life she had been alone. In this life she had $200 million. A private investigator, and a question she hadn't had last time. Had Alex Chan been investigating Marcus all along? Had the investigation failed because no one had been inside the trap to hand him the evidence? She didn't know the answer yet. But she was about to find out. Evelyn finally raised the glass to her lips and took a sip. The champagne was dry, expensive, the kind Marcus would choose. She set the glass down on a tray and walked toward the back door. She had plans to make. The engagement party lasted until 11. Evelyn stayed until 9. She slipped out through the back gate and walked the 3 blocks to her car. The street was quiet, suburban silence. The kind of quiet that made her previous life feel like a fever dream she had finally woken up from. But she hadn't woken up, she was still in it, and the weight of what she knew pressed against her ribs like a second heartbeat. She drove to her apartment, a 1-bedroom in a building her father owned, rent-free, because you'll figure things out eventually, Ev. In her previous life, she had felt grateful for that. In this life, she saw it for what it was, a gilded cage. Everything she had was borrowed from her family, everything except the $200 million in a bank account no one knew about. She let herself in, locked the door, and stood in the dark living room. The streetlight cast a rectangle of orange light across the floor. She walked to the window and looked down at the street. No black cars, no federal badges, just quiet. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up. An email from Sarah Okonkwo. * Initial search on Sterling Capital returns interesting results. Full report in 10 days. Preliminary findings. Sterling Capital has 3 registered addresses. Only one is a real office, the other 2 are mailbox stores. Will update. * Evelyn read the email twice. 3 addresses, only one real. That was the shape of the trap. Shell companies, phantom addresses, money that moved through paper doors. In her previous life she had found this information 6 months too late. In this life she had it before Marcus had even signed the first transfer document. She typed a reply, "Keep digging, I want everything." Then she opened a second email. The lawyer who had set up the holding company had sent the final documents. Alder Lane Holdings was officially registered. She was the sole director, the sole beneficiary. The sole person who knew it existed. She had built the first wall, now she needed to build the rest. The next morning, Evelyn walked into Vance Holdings for the first time in 8 months. The building hadn't changed, glass lobby, marble floors, a receptionist who didn't look up when she walked through the door. Evelyn had never worked here. Her father had offered her a position when she graduated college, but the offer came with conditions: start in admin, work your way up, prove yourself. She had said she'd think about it. She had never followed up. In her previous life she had spent 8 years not following up. By the time she wanted to, Marcus was already on the board and her opinions had stopped mattering in this life. She walked past the receptionist and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Her father's office. She didn't have an appointment, she didn't need one, she was his daughter, and in her previous life that had been enough. The elevator doors opened, her father's assistant looked up. Evelyn, your father didn't mention you were coming. He doesn't know. The assistant hesitated. He's in a meeting. With who? A pause. Marcus Sterling. Of course he was. Evelyn sat down in the chair across from the assistant's desk. I'll wait. 45 minutes later, the door opened. Marcus Sterling stepped out, smiling, a folder tucked under his arm. He saw Evelyn and the smile widened. Evelyn, good to see you. His voice was warm, perfectly calibrated, the voice of a man who had never needed to raise it to get what he wanted. Marcus. I didn't see you at the party last night. I was there. I must have missed you. He said it like it was her fault, like being overlooked was something she should apologize for. Your father and I were just discussing some exciting opportunities for Vance Holdings. You should ask him about it. I will. He held her gaze for a moment longer than comfortable. Then he nodded and walked toward the elevator. Evelyn watched him go. Her hands were cold. She pressed them flat against her thighs and waited for the elevator doors to close before she stood. Her father's voice came from the office. Evelyn, come in. She walked in. Richard Vance was behind his desk, reading a document with the satisfied expression of a man who thought he was winning. He looked up when she entered. To what do I owe the pleasure? I was in the neighborhood. He laughed. You're never in the neighborhood. What do you want? Evelyn sat down in the chair Marcus had just vacated. The leather was still warm. I want to know what you're signing. Her father's eyebrows lifted. Excuse me. The documents Marcus just handed you, I want to know what they say. That's private business, Evelyn. I'm your daughter. And you don't work here, you've never worked here, you've shown zero interest in this company for 8 years, and now you walk in and want to see contracts. She had expected this. In her previous life she had let this stop her. She had apologized, backed down, told herself he was right. In this life she didn't blink. Dad, what are you signing? He stared at her. She didn't look away. Something shifted in his face, surprise maybe, or recognition. He didn't know this version of her. He had never seen it before. They're partnership agreements, he said finally. Marcus is bringing Sterling Capital into a joint venture with Vance Holdings Real Estate Development. He's identified 3 properties that he can acquire at below market rates, and he needs our capital to close the deals. We split the profit 60-40. Who gets 60? Us. Evelyn kept her face still. In her previous life, this exact deal had been the first thread Marcus pulled. The properties didn't exist. The below market rates were fabricated. The 60-40 split was structured so that Vance Holdings put up the capital while Sterling Capital controlled the sale terms. By the time anyone realized the properties were shells, the money was gone. Have you had a lawyer review the contracts? She asked. Marcus's lawyer drafted them. He's got a top-tier team. A lawyer who represents him. He's my future son-in-law, Evelyn. He's family. In her previous life, this was the line she had never crossed. She had told herself the same thing. He was family. She had trusted him because everyone else did. She had been wrong. Get an independent lawyer, she said. Excuse me. Get an independent lawyer to review the contracts before you sign anything. Her father set the document down. His expression had hardened. You've been in my office for 4 minutes. And you're telling me how to run my company. I'm telling you to be careful. I've been running this company for 30 years. I don't need my daughter, who has never shown a single interest in business, to walk in and tell me to be careful. Evelyn stood up. I'm not trying to tell you how to run your company. I'm trying to protect our family. We don't need your protection, Evelyn. We need you to show up once in a while. Maybe come to dinner, be a daughter instead of a stranger. The words landed. They were meant to. In her previous life they had made her cry. In this life she nodded once. I'll come to dinner, but I'm not wrong about the contracts. She turned and walked out of the office. Her father called her name once. She didn't stop. She was in the elevator, pressing the lobby button when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, I saw you leave Vance Holdings, small world. Chun asterisk. Evelyn stared at the screen. He had seen her. He had her number. She hadn't given it to him last night. He had found it. She typed back, how did you get my number? Asterisk, I'm an investigator. It's my job. Asterisk, she waited. Another message came through. Asterisk, can I buy you a coffee? There's something I'd like to discuss. Asterisk, in her previous life she would have ignored this. She was a woman who said no to people she didn't know, who kept her head down, who let opportunities pass because she was too scared to reach for them. In this life she typed where. He sent an address, a cafe 2 blocks from the Vance Holdings building. She walked there. She didn't know why. Maybe because in her previous life no one had ever asked her for coffee. Maybe because Alex Chun was the only person in this city who had looked at her like she was worth paying attention to. Or maybe because if Alex Chun was investigating Marcus, that made him the closest thing she had to an ally. The cafe was small, wood tables, the smell of fresh bread. Alex was sitting at a corner table, 2 cups in front of him. He stood when she walked in. Black coffee, no sugar, he said. I took a guess. Your guess is right. She sat down. He sat across from her. The cafe was quiet. Lunch rush hadn't started yet. They were the only 2 people in the corner section. I'm not going to pretend I ran into you by accident, he said. You didn't. I followed you from the bank yesterday, not professionally. I had a meeting at Sterling Capital and saw you leaving. I was curious. About what? About why Richard Vance's daughter, who isn't on any company records, who doesn't work there, who has no visible connection to the business, is opening a holding company account the same week her sister gets engaged to a man whose financial records I'm reviewing. Evelyn picked up the coffee. It was perfect. She didn't tell him that. I'm starting a business, she said. What kind? Import, export, I haven't decided yet. He smiled. It was the first time she had seen him do it. It changed his face. Made him look younger. Less like a federal agent and more like a man who might actually enjoy a cup of coffee with someone. That's a terrible lie, he said. I know. I'm not going to push, but I want you to know that I'm not your enemy. Ms. Vance. Evelyn. Evelyn. He said it like he was trying the name for the first time. Whatever you're doing with the account with the holding company, I don't think it's illegal. I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between someone hiding money and someone protecting themselves. She didn't answer. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. I'm just asking you to consider that you might not have to do this alone. The words hung between them. In her previous life she had been alone. She had died alone. She had learned that relying on other people was a mistake that cost everything. But Alex Chun wasn't asking her to rely on him. He was just offering to stand nearby. She took a breath. Why are you really looking at Marcus Sterling? His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. Because I think he's moving money through a network of shell companies that spans 3 states. And I think he's about to move a lot more of it through whatever deal he's negotiating with your father. You've been watching him? For 6 months. Has anyone else? Not that I know of. Evelyn set the coffee down. Her hand was steady, the weight of her secret pressed against her ribs, but she didn't let it show. If you find something, she said, will you tell me? I'm not supposed to share investigative information with civilians. I'm not asking as a civilian, I'm asking as someone whose family is about to sign a contract with him. He held her gaze. The silence stretched. I'll tell you what I can, he said finally. It wasn't a promise, it was more than she had expected. She stood up. Thank you for the coffee, Agent Chan. It's not Agent, just Alex. She nodded once. Then she walked out of the cafe, the taste of perfect coffee still on her tongue, and the weight of Alex Chen's eyes on her back like a question she wasn't ready to answer. She was 3 blocks away when her phone buzzed again. Another email from Sarah. Asterisk, found something. Sterling Capital's second address isn't a mailbox store. It's a residential apartment, Unit 4B. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, the lease is under a name you'll recognize. Asterisk, Evelyn stopped walking. Asterisk, your sister, Vanessa Vance. Asterisk, she read the email 3 times. Marcus had put Vanessa's name on a lease. Residential apartment, not their shared home. A separate address. A place he had hidden under her sister's name. In her previous life, Evelyn had never found this. She had died without knowing about the second apartment. She typed back, address. Sarah replied in 30 seconds, 47 Harbor Lane, Waterfront District. The lease was signed 3 months ago. 3 months ago, before the engagement, before Marcus had proposed to Vanessa in front of 100 guests. He had been planning this from the beginning. The apartment was a drop point, a place where documents were signed, money was counted. And a name was waiting to take the fall. Vanessa's name. Evelyn looked up. The street was busy, people walking, cars moving. The city humming with the ordinary rhythm of a day that hadn't been split open by what she had just learned. In her previous life, she had thought Vanessa was innocent, a victim of Marcus's manipulation, same as everyone else, but Vanessa's name was on a lease, hidden, and Evelyn had to ask herself a question she hadn't considered. What if Vanessa wasn't a victim? What if she knew? Evelyn put her phone in her pocket and started walking. She didn't know the answer yet, but she was going to find out. The address was real. Evelyn stood across the street from 47 Harbor Lane and watched the building breathe. A modern high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light like mirrors. A doorman in a navy coat stood under a brass awning, checking his phone. Bronze address plates gleamed above the entrance. The kind of building where leases weren't signed without references, deposits, and credit checks that could trace every dollar back to its source. Vanessa's name was on the lease. Evelyn had been standing here for 10 minutes, long enough to confirm that Unit 4B had the curtains drawn and the lights off, long enough to see a man in a dark suit leave the building carrying a leather briefcase. Not Marcus, but someone who moved with the same calculated ease, the same refusal to meet the doorman's eyes, long enough to feel the shape of the truth settling into her chest like a stone she couldn't cough up. In her previous life, she had never known about this apartment. She had died without knowing Vanessa's name was on a lease Marcus had signed 3 months before the engagement. The question she had been avoiding all morning surfaced again. Did Vanessa know? Evelyn crossed the street before she could answer it. The doorman looked up. Delivery for Unit 4B, she said. Name? Vance. He checked a clipboard mounted to the wall. I don't have a delivery scheduled. Must be the wrong address. She smiled, apologetic, vague, the kind of smile that said I'm slightly embarrassed and I'll be out of your way in a moment, and walked past him into the lobby before he could process what had just happened. The elevator was polished chrome, the floor a checkerboard of marble. She pressed 4, the doors closed. She had 2 minutes, maybe 3, before the doorman decided to check on the woman who had lied about a delivery. That was all the time she needed. The 4th floor hallway was quiet, carpet the color of sand, for doors spaced evenly apart. Unit 4B was at the end. Evelyn stopped in front of it. No nameplate, no welcome mat, no indication that anyone lived here at all. Just a plain white door with a deadbolt lock that looked expensive. She pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. She knocked. No answer. She was reaching into her bag for the wallet that contained nothing useful when the door behind her opened. Can I help you? Evelyn turned. A woman in her 60s stood in the doorway of Unit 4C. A small white dog tucked under her arm. The dog had begun to yap, a sharp, insistent sound that echoed in the narrow hallway. I'm looking for my sister, Evelyn said. Vanessa, blonde, about my height. I think I got the wrong apartment. The woman's expression softened. Oh, the young woman who comes by on Tuesdays, pretty blonde. Evelyn's blood went cold. She kept her face still. That's her. I haven't seen her this week, but she usually comes with her husband, tall man, very handsome. The woman smiled. They're a lovely couple, always polite. Thank you. Evelyn walked back to the elevator. Her legs were steady. Her hands were not. Tuesday. Vanessa came here on Tuesdays with Marcus, to an apartment her name was on, but that wasn't their home, that she had never mentioned to their parents, that existed in a blind spot large enough to hide whatever Marcus needed it to hide. She knew whatever Vanessa's role was, she was not a victim. She was at least a participant. The elevator arrived. Evelyn stepped inside and pressed the lobby button. When the doors opened, the doorman was waiting. Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave. I'm already leaving. She walked past him and out into the morning light. The building gleamed behind her like a polished tooth. The Vance Holdings offices were quieter than usual when Evelyn walked through the lobby at noon. The receptionist was on the phone. The security guard was reading a newspaper propped open on the desk. No one looked up. No one stopped her. She took the stairs. For flights, she needed the movement, the burn in her calves, something physical to drain the cold energy that had settled behind her ribs like a coiled spring. Her father's office door was closed. She could hear voices inside. She didn't knock. She sat in the chair outside his assistant's desk and waited. The door opened 20 minutes later. Marcus Sterling stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, a folder tucked under his arm. He saw Evelyn and his eyebrows rose in practiced surprise. Evelyn, twice in 1 week. Your father must be thrilled. Is he free? He's always free for you. The smile was warm, the eyes were not. Marcus Sterling had mastered the art of saying one thing while thinking another, and in her previous life, Evelyn had never been able to tell the difference. In this life, she watched the disconnect like a Crack in a dam. He walked past her toward the elevator. She watched him go, counting the steps until the doors closed. 8 steps. He never looked back. She knocked on her father's door and walked in. Richard Vance was standing by the window, phone in hand, the same folder Marcus had been carrying now open on his desk. He looked up when she entered. His expression was guarded, the same look he had worn when she left his office 2 days ago. Evelyn, Dad. I have a meeting in 15 minutes. I'll be quick. She sat down. He didn't. The power dynamic was deliberate. She understood it. In her previous life, she had always sat while he stood, always looked up while he looked down, always made herself smaller because that was what the room expected. Marcus just left, she said. I'm aware. What did he want? To finalize the partnership agreement we're signing next week. Don't. Her father's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes, irritation, or maybe the beginning of doubt, that he would crush before it could take root. We've had this conversation. We had half of it. I didn't tell you everything I know. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Sarah's email was still open. She turned the screen toward her father and watched his face as he read. *47 Harbor Lane, Unit 4B, lease under Vanessa Vance, signed 3 months ago. Her father read the email. His expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on the edge of the desk. I don't know what this is supposed to prove, he said. It proves he's hiding something. It proves my daughter signed a lease on an apartment. Vanessa's an adult. She can sign a lease without my permission. You didn't know about it? Vanessa doesn't tell me everything. She tells you everything. You're the one she calls when she has a flat tire. You're the one she asks for advice on investments. She tells you everything. He set the phone down on the desk. The screen went dark. Evelyn, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you need to understand something. I have run this company for 30 years. I have built relationships, signed contracts, made deals that kept food on our table and a roof over our heads. I did all of this without your input, and I don't need it now. I'm your daughter. And you're my daughter, not my business partner, not my advisor, my daughter. The words landed like a door closing. In her previous life, they had made her shrink. In this life, she sat perfectly still and let them pass through her. I can't tell you what to do, she said. I can only ask you to trust me. I do trust you, but I also trust Marcus, and I've been doing business long enough to know that you can't run a company on suspicion and bad feelings. He picked up the folder. The gesture was final. Evelyn stood at the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle. Dad, in 5 years, when everything falls apart and you're sitting in a room with nothing left, please remember that I tried. She walked out before he could answer. The call came. That evening, Evelyn was in her apartment, reviewing the bank documents for Alder Lane Holdings, when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She let it ring twice, then answered. Ms. Vance, this is Alex Chan. She set the documents down. The name sent a small current through her chest. I remember. Am I calling at a bad time? No? Good. I wanted to follow up on something we discussed. He paused, a breath. Formally. I'm conducting interviews with individuals connected to Sterling Capital's financial network. You've been identified as a person of interest. Because I opened a bank account. Because you're connected to a family that's about to enter a significant financial partnership with Sterling Capital. I need to document that you weren't involved in the negotiations. Document it for what? For the record, standard procedure. She didn't believe him, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was giving her a reason to be in the same room with him, officially, where she could ask questions she couldn't ask anywhere else. Where and when? Tomorrow 10 a.m. my office. I'll send you the address. The line went dead. Evelyn stared at the phone for a long moment. Then she saved the number under the name she had already typed in before she could stop herself. *Alex, *, His office was not what she expected. It was in the Federal Building on 3rd Street, the kind of gray government structure designed to be forgotten. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Linoleum floors reflected the harsh white light. The air smelled like stale coffee and toner and the particular sterility of a place where secrets came to be catalogued. Alex met her at the security desk. He was wearing a jacket and tie today, more formal than the coffee shop, but his sleeves were rolled to the elbow and his collar was slightly crooked. He signed her in, handed her a visitor badge, and led her through a maze of cubicles to a small office at the end of the hall. I know it's not impressive, he said, closing the door behind them. It's honest. He almost smiled. Sit. She sat. The chair was uncomfortable, the kind that made you want to tell the truth just so you could leave. The desk was stacked with files, some open, some marked with yellow sticky notes. A whiteboard in the corner had a diagram that looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream. Names connected by arrows, dollar amount circled in red, question marks next to entities she didn't recognize. She recognized Marcus Sterling's name, her father's name, 3 shell companies she had never heard of, and in the corner, in smaller print, written in Alex's precise handwriting, Evance, Alder Lane Holdings, unclear role. He had found her already. What role do you think I have? She asked. Alex sat down across from her. The desk between them was cluttered with paper, but his attention was entirely on her. I don't know yet. That's why you're here. He opened a folder. His handwriting was small, neat notes from their conversation at the coffee shop, probably things she had said that he had filed away for later analysis. Why don't you tell me about Alder Lane Holdings? It's a business I'm starting. What kind of business? Import and export. You said that last time. Because it's the truth. He leaned back, the fluorescent light caught the edge of his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the slight shadow of beard he hadn't quite shaved clean. He was handsome in a way that felt accidental, like he had never bothered to notice, and neither had anyone else until now. You're not lying, he said. But you're not telling me everything. I'm telling you what I can. And the rest is mine. He studied her for a long moment, then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a file, thicker than the others, marked with a red tab. I've been watching Marcus Sterling for 6 months, he said. In that time, he's moved approximately $4 million through a network of accounts that don't have a clear business purpose. The money goes in clean and comes out clean, but the middle is where it gets interesting. He opened the file. She saw bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and corporation documents, the paper trail of a man who thought he was invisible. $4 million is small, he continued. But the pattern suggests he's testing the infrastructure, building the pipeline, and your father's company, Vance Holdings, has the kind of capital flow that could hide much larger transfers. You think he's going to use Vance Holdings to launder money? I think he's going to try. Whether he succeeds depends on whether anyone stops him. Evelyn looked at the documents spread across his desk. In her previous life, these papers had existed somewhere, but she had never seen them. She had died not knowing how much evidence there was. Why are you showing me this? Because I think you already know what it says. And I think you're trying to stop him on your own. I'm not trying to stop him. Then what are you doing? She met his eyes, the fluorescent light hummed, the silence between them was thin and sharp. Building a safety net, she said. For who? For everyone who's about to fall. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds, then he nodded like she had confirmed something he already suspected. Ask me the questions then, she said. He did for 40 minutes. He asked about her relationship with Marcus, her knowledge of Sterling Capital, her visits to Vance Holdings. She answered honestly where she could, deflected where she couldn't, and said nothing about the lottery money or Sarah Okonkwo. When the interview was over, he walked her back to the security desk. She handed in her visitor badge. Thank you for coming, he said. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. He held the door for her. The afternoon light was sharp after the fluorescent dimness. Most people choose to stay quiet. You chose to show up. She stepped outside. The door closed behind her. She had made it through the interview without revealing anything important. But Alex Chun had made something clear. He saw her. He didn't know what she was hiding, but he knew she was hiding something, and he had offered to help anyway. The lunch invitation came the next morning. A text from Vanessa, *sisters lunch, Harbor Grill, 1 p.m. Don't be late, Harbor Grill. The name hit Evelyn like a slap. Harbor Lane, Harbor Grill, a coincidence, probably. The waterfront district had a dozen restaurants with harbor in the name. And Vanessa had always liked seafood, but Evelyn didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Not in this life. She arrived at 12:50. The restaurant was glass and chrome, perched at the edge of the marina where boats rocked gently against their moorings. Vanessa was already seated at a table by the window, a glass of white wine in front of her, her engagement ring catching the light like a lighthouse beacon. She smiled when Evelyn sat down, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. You came? I said I would. I know, but you've been weird lately, distant. Evelyn unfolded her napkin. The fabric was starched, heavy. I've been busy. Busy doing what? Starting a business. Vanessa laughed. It was a sharp sound meant to cut. Right, your import-export thing. It's not a joke, Vanessa. Oh, I know, I'm sure it's very serious. She picked up her wine glass and took a long drink. Where's the office? Do you have investors, a business plan? Why does it matter to you? Because I'm your sister. I'm supposed to know these things. You didn't know about my holding company account, you didn't know about my PI, you didn't know about a lot of things. Vanessa set the glass down, the smile was gone now. What PI? I told you yesterday, the one I hired to look into Marcus. I thought you were bluffing. I don't bluff. The word hung between them. The waiter arrived. Evelyn ordered water. Vanessa ordered another wine. When the waiter left, the silence at the table was sharp enough. To cut glass, Harbor Lane, Evelyn said. Nice area. Vanessa's hand stopped moving on the table. The wine glass was halfway to her lips. She set it down with exaggerated care. I've heard the buildings there are beautiful, new construction, water views. I wouldn't know. No, because I heard you signed a lease on an apartment there 3 months ago. The mask slipped, just for a fraction of a second, but Evelyn saw it, the flicker in Vanessa's eyes, the way her jaw tightened before she forced herself to relax. How do you know about that? A PI hired to look into Marcus, you just happened to be on the lease. We're engaged, we're allowed to have an apartment. Then why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell Mom and Dad? Vanessa's eyes darted toward the window, the boats, the water, anywhere but Evelyn's face. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. I can't. Can't or won't. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the stem of the wine glass. Marcus is going through something business stuff. The apartment is for meetings, private meetings. He didn't want people to know because it looks bad. Looks bad how? Like he's hiding something which he's not. The words came too fast. Sometimes investors want discretion, privacy, the kind of thing that doesn't happen in a public office. You're telling me Marcus uses an apartment under your name for investor meetings? Yes. And you're okay with that? It's temporary. Temporary for what? Vanessa's composure cracked. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angrily, as if the tear had betrayed her. He's building something big, and when it's done we're going to be set. All of us, you, me, Mom and Dad, he told me. Vanessa, there's a federal investigator looking at Marcus' financial crimes. He's been watching him for 6 months. You're lying. I'm not. You're making this up because you're jealous. Of what? Of me, of Marcus, of everything I have that you don't. The words hung in the air like smoke, raw, unfiltered, the truth that Vanessa had never said out loud but had always believed, that Evelyn drifted through life while Vanessa built something real, that Evelyn had nothing and Vanessa had everything. Evelyn looked at her sister, the diamond ring, the designer dress, the face that had been told her whole life that she was the pretty one, the successful one, the one who would marry well. In her previous life she had believed it too. She had looked at Vanessa and felt small. Vanessa, I'm not jealous of you, I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving. Then why is your name on a lease you didn't tell anyone about? Vanessa stood up, the chair scraped against the floor, the table wobbled, the wine glass tipped, but Evelyn caught it before it could fall. I have to go, Vanessa said. Vanessa? Don't follow me. She grabbed her bag and walked out. The restaurant door swung shut behind her, heads turned. The waiter looked uncertain. Evelyn set the wine glass upright and placed her napkin on the table. Through the window, she watched Vanessa stand on the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear. Her sister's shoulders were tight. Her free hand gestured as she spoke. Quick, agitated movements, calling Marcus, telling him what Evelyn had said. The trap was closing, not around Evelyn, around everyone else. Evelyn paid for the lunch Vanessa hadn't touched and walked out into the afternoon sun. The air was warm, but she felt cold down to her bones. The conversation with Vanessa had confirmed everything she had suspected and nothing she had hoped. Her sister was not an innocent victim. She was at least a knowing participant in the apartment. Whether she understood the full scope of what Marcus was doing, whether she knew about the shell companies, the laundered money, the family assets he planned to drain, that remained unclear. But she knew enough. She knew the apartment existed. She had lied about it, and she had chosen Marcus over Evelyn without hesitation. Evelyn walked without direction. Her feet carried her east, toward the waterfront, toward the building she had stood in front of the day before. She didn't mean to go there, but her body seemed to know what her mind wasn't ready to admit. She stopped at the corner of Harbor Lane and 3rd. Across the street, the high-rise gleamed. Unit 4B was still dark. Something in her chest cracked. It was small. A hairline fracture in the wall she had built around herself, but it was enough to let a sliver of cold air in. She had been so sure of her plan. Let them fall, watch them hit bottom, then be there with the safety net, with the $200 million tucked away in Alder Lane Holdings, with the evidence Sarah was gathering, with everything she had built in the 3 days since she had woken up in her childhood bedroom. She had thought the hardest part would be staying silent while her family made the same mistakes. She hadn't accounted for the possibility that her sister was not a passenger in Marcus's car but a driver. The implication shifted everything she had planned. If Vanessa was knowingly involved, if she had signed the lease with full understanding of what Marcus was using it for, then Evelyn wasn't just letting a victim fall, she was letting an accomplice walk into a trap of her own making, and when the trap closed, Vanessa would go down with Marcus. The thought should have felt like justice, it felt like grief. What if Vanessa isn't falling? Evelyn whispered to the empty air. What if she's jumping? Evelyn. She turned. Alex Chan was standing 10 feet away, a paper coffee cup in his hand. He was in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a gray jacket, and he looked like he had been walking in the same direction she had been walking. The coincidence was too precise to be accidental. I was in the area, he said. Following me? No, looking at a property. He nodded toward the building behind her, the same building, 47 Harbor Lane. Her heart stopped. You know about the apartment? I know about the lease. I've known for 2 months. She stared at him. The information landed slowly like a stone falling through deep water. And you didn't tell me. I didn't know if I could trust you. Can you trust me now? He looked at her. The afternoon light caught his face, softening the sharp lines of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. He stepped closer. I'm starting to. They stood at the corner of Harbor Lane and 3rd. The building loomed behind them. Evelyn's sister had signed a lease she couldn't explain in an apartment she came to on Tuesdays, and Alex Chun had known about it for 2 months. How long have you been watching the apartment? She asked. 2 months since I found the lease. I've been documenting who comes and goes. And Marcus Sterling visits 3 times a week, sometimes with your sister, sometimes alone, sometimes with men who carry briefcases and don't look at the doorman. The word settled into her chest. She had known, but hearing it confirmed made it real. I need coffee, she said. He held up his cup. I know a place. They walked in silence. The cafe was 2 blocks away, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore, small wood tables, the smell of fresh bread and something roasted. A radio played low from behind the counter, jazz, the kind that didn't demand attention. Alex ordered for both of them, black coffee for her, something complicated with oat milk for himself. He didn't ask what she wanted. He just knew. The observation was small, but it settled into her chest like a stone in warm water. They sat at a table in the corner. The window faced the street. Through the glass, she could see the top of 47 Harbor Lane rising above the roofline of the building across the street. She couldn't escape it. The building was everywhere. Neither of them spoke. For 20 minutes they just sat there. Evelyn didn't tell him about the lunch with Vanessa. He didn't ask. He didn't try to fill the silence the way most people did, with nervous chatter, with questions, with the kind of words that pretended to be connection. He just let the quiet exist between them. She drank her coffee. It was perfect. She didn't tell him that either. When she finally stood to leave, he stood too at the door. His hand brushed her shoulder. A steadying touch, an accident of proximity, but the warmth of it stayed on her skin long after she had walked away. Back in her apartment, Evelyn sat on the floor with her back against the wall. The streetlight cast a rectangle of orange light across the hardwood. She took out her phone and opened a notes file. Things I know for certain. 1 Marcus has been moving money for months. Alex is building a case. 2 Vanessa's name is on the lease for an apartment used for investor meetings. 3 Vanessa knows more than she told me. She chose Marcus. 4 My father is signing a deal next week that will open Vance Holdings to Marcus. 5 I have $200 million in a holding company no one knows about. 6 Alex Chan has been watching Marcus for 6 months. He knew about the apartment. He told me today. She stared at the 6th line. She added a 7th. 7 Alex Chan is the only person in this city who has looked at me and seen something worth protecting. She didn't know what to do with that. It was the one variable she hadn't planned for, the one piece of the puzzle that didn't fit her careful calculations. In her previous life, she had trusted no one, and she had died alone in that rented room above the laundromat, with no one to call, no one to find her body for 3 days. The loneliness of her death had been as complete as the silence that followed it. In this life, she had built walls so high that no one could reach her. She had told herself it was necessary, that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, that the only person she could rely on was herself. But Alex Chun had found a crack in the foundation. Not by force, by presence, by showing up at a coffee shop without being asked, by keeping a space for her silence, by brushing her shoulder like it meant something. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know if it meant anything at all. But it was there, warm and unexpected, like a light in a room she had assumed was empty. She locked her phone and set it on the floor beside her. The rectangle of orange light from the street lamp had shifted across the floor, time was passing. In her previous life, time had been her enemy. It had run out before she could save herself. In this life, time was her currency. Every day she had was one more day to build. But the building loomed in her mind, 47 Harbor Lane, Unit 4B, the room where industry secrets and family futures came to be destroyed. Tomorrow, she would visit 47 Harbor Lane again. This time she would find a way inside. The doorman changed shifts at 2 p.m. Evelyn had watched the pattern for 2 days. Morning shift, a man in his 50s who checked every visitor against a list. Afternoon shift, a younger man who spent most of his time on his phone, scrolling, barely looking up when tenants walked past. The window between shift change was roughly 4 minutes, long enough for one guard to log out and another to hang his jacket and settle in. She timed her approach for 2:02 p.m. The lobby was empty when she walked in. The afternoon doorman was in the back office, still pulling on his uniform jacket, his back to the door. She crossed the marble floor with steady, unhurried steps, the same way tenants walked when they belonged, like she had done this 100 times before. She took the stairs for flights, ascending in silence. By the time she reached the 4th-floor landing, her calves were burning. She ignored the pain and pushed through the door. The hallway was quiet. Unit 4B's door was still plain white, still locked. The deadbolt she had noticed on her first visit gleamed under the hallway lights. But this time, she had come prepared. Sarah had sent her a list of methods for gaining access to secured properties. The simplest was social engineering: call building management, claim you lost your key, offer to pay the locksmith fee to the superintendent directly. Evelyn had executed it the day before, using a burner phone and a voice that sounded like she was running late for a meeting. The superintendent had handed over an old spare key without asking questions. He had checked the lease number she had given him against his records, found a match, and handed her the key with a warning to be more careful next time. People believed what they were told when it was inconvenient to verify. The key turned smoothly, the lock clicked open. Evelyn pushed the door and stepped inside. The apartment was not what she expected. It was empty, not furnished, empty. The way a show apartment looks before the first tenant moves in. Empty. No furniture, no curtains, no dishes in the sink, no toothbrush in the bathroom. No sign that anyone had ever lived here. Just bare walls painted a neutral beige, gray carpet with vacuum lines still visible, and cheap vertical blinds hanging crooked across the sliding glass door to a balcony that faced the water. In the center of the living room, on the gray carpet, sat a single folding table. On the table was a filing box. Evelyn approached it slowly, her footsteps silent on the carpet. The box was unmarked, unremarkable, the kind you could buy at any office supply store for $12, but it was the only thing in the entire apartment that showed any sign of use. The corners were worn, the lid had been opened and closed many times. She lifted the lid. Inside were files, dozens of them, each one labeled with a company name she recognized from Sarah's preliminary report: Horizon Capital, North Star Holdings, Bellwether Partners. The names were innocuous, designed to sound legitimate, to pass any cursory background check. But each one was a shell company in Marcus Sterling's network, and each file contained original documents, bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, incorporation certificates embossed with state seals, the paper spine of a money laundering operation, stored in a cardboard box in an empty apartment. Evelyn pulled out the top file. It was labeled in neat type text: Project Horizon Phase 1 Vance Holdings. Her hands went cold. She opened the file. Inside was a single piece of paper, a timeline, a list of dates and dollar amounts, laid out in a clean table that looked like it belonged in a quarterly business review, not a criminal operation. The first transfer, $500,000 from Vance Holdings operating accounts to Horizon Capital, scheduled for the week following contract signing. The second transfer, $2 million 2 weeks later. The third, $3 million, 1 month after that. At the bottom of the timeline, a total $47 million. Her father's company was scheduled to lose $47 million in 6 months, and Marcus Sterling had written it down on a single page. As if he were planning a vacation itinerary, Evelyn took out her phone and began photographing every document, page by page: the timeline, the bank statements showing the first trickle of cross-account transfers, the incorporation documents with Marcus's signature on the dotted line, the wire confirmations with dates and routing numbers, the names of the shell companies and their registered agents. She was on the last page when she heard the elevator, the sound of doors opening, footsteps in the hallway, a key turning in a lock. Not the door she had come through, a different door further down the hall. Someone was in the apartment next door. Evelyn stopped. She held her breath. The voices were muffled through the walls. A man and a woman, speaking in the casual tones of people who knew each other well. Not Marcus, not Vanessa, but close enough that the risk of discovery had just multiplied. She closed the filing box, replaced the lid exactly as she had found it, and moved to the door. She pressed her ear to the wood for 3 seconds. The voices continued. No one was coming her way. She slipped out of Unit 4B, locked the door behind her, and walked to the stairs at a normal pace. No running, no panic, just a woman leaving a building she had every right to be in. The afternoon doorman was at his post when she passed through the lobby. He looked up from his phone. She nodded at him once, the way tenants did. He nodded back and returned to his screen. She was 3 blocks away before she stopped breathing normally. The call came an hour later. Evelyn was in her apartment, transferring the photographs from her phone to a secure, encrypted folder, when a text message arrived from her father. Deal signed, celebration dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Don't be late, She stared at the screen. The words didn't change no matter how many times she read them. He had signed, despite everything she had said, despite the apartment, despite the lease in Vanessa's name, despite her standing in his office and asking him to wait. Richard Vance had put his signature on Marcus Sterling's contract, and the first transfer of $500,000 was now inevitable. Evelyn set the phone down on the kitchen counter. She did not cry. She did not throw the phone against the wall. She sat very still on her living room floor and let the feeling pass through her like a wave she had been expecting since the moment she opened her eyes to a water stain shaped like Texas in her previous life. This was the moment everything began to crumble. The signed contract, the celebration dinner, the slow, invisible drain that would empty her family's accounts within 18 months. She had watched it happen without understanding what she was watching. She had seen Marcus at the dinner table and thought he looked like a businessman celebrating a good quarter. This time, she had the photographs, she had the timeline, she had the $47 million projection stored on her phone. This time, she knew exactly what was coming. She picked up the phone and typed a reply, "I'll be there." The dinner was at a private dining room in a restaurant her father liked. On the top floor of a building downtown, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths starched to sharpness, wine poured by waiters who never let a glass go empty and appeared at the table with fresh bottles before anyone had to ask. Evelyn arrived at 7:15, late enough to make a point, early enough that she couldn't be accused of not showing up. Marcus was already there, seated at the head of the table like he owned it, which Evelyn thought would be true soon enough. Her father sat at the opposite end, a glass of scotch in his hand. His expression relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in years. Her mother was on Marcus's right, beaming at her future son-in-law with undisguised adoration. Vanessa was on his left, her hand resting on his forearm, her engagement ring catching the candlelight like a warning beacon. "Evelyn." Her mother's voice was bright, slightly thickened by champagne. "You made it. I said I would. Your father has the most wonderful news. I heard." Richard Vance raised his glass to new partnerships. Everyone raised their glasses. Glasses clinked, champagne shimmered. Evelyn raised hers. She did not drink. "Evelyn, you look lovely," Marcus said. His voice was warm, sincere, perfectly calibrated for the audience. "I'm glad you could join us tonight. I'm glad you're so happy." Something flickered in his eyes, a wariness she hadn't seen before. He had noticed her distance at the engagement party. He had heard from Vanessa about the PI, about the questions she was asking. He was starting to realize that Richard Vance's older daughter was not the non-entity everyone had assumed her to be. "Vanessa tells me you're starting a business," he said. "I am? What kind?" "Import and export." "Sounds interesting." "It is." The conversation moved on. Her father talked about the joint venture's projected returns. Her mother talked about wedding venues. Vanessa talked about the honeymoon. Greece. Marcus's idea, a villa on Santorini with an infinity pool overlooking the caldera. Through it all, Evelyn sat in silence, eating food she didn't taste, watching the trap close around people who were too busy celebrating to notice the teeth. At 8:30, she excused herself, not to the restroom, but to the window at the end of the hallway. The city lights spread out below her like a circuit board. Somewhere out there, 47 Harbor Lane stood in the dark, its secret still locked in a filing box she had already emptied with her phone camera. "You've been quiet all night." She turned. Marcus was standing at the end of the hallway, hands in his pockets, that practiced smile on his face. "Excuse me. At dinner you barely said a word." "I don't have much to say." "That's not what I've heard." She turned fully to face him. The hallway was empty. No waiters, no other diners, no witnesses, just the two of them and the soft hum of the ventilation system. "What have you heard?" she asked. "That you've Been asking questions that you hired someone to look into my background. He smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. I understand you're protective of your family. I admire that. You don't have to admire it. I'm not your enemy, Evelyn. Then why does it feel like you are? He stepped closer. Not threatening, just present. The kind of presence that made the hallway feel smaller, the ceiling lower. Your father and I have signed a partnership that will secure your family's future for the next generation. I'm marrying your sister. I'm going to be part of this family. You don't have to like me, but you don't have to fight me either. Who said I was fighting? You didn't have to. He smiled again. The look on your face says enough. He turned and walked back toward the private dining room. His footsteps were unhurried, confident. The walk of a man who had never lost anything he cared about. Evelyn stayed at the window. The city lights blurred. She blinked hard and they came back into focus. Marcus knew she was watching. He was good at reading people. That was part of what made him dangerous. But knowing she was watching and knowing what she had in her possession were two completely different things. He thought he was winning. He didn't know she had photographed every document in his secret filing box. She left the dinner at 9 p.m. Her mother protested half-heartedly. Her father barely looked up from his scotch. Vanessa didn't say goodbye. Evelyn walked out of the restaurant. Into the cool night air. A car was parked across the street, engine off, windows dark. She recognized it before she saw the driver's silhouette. Alex Chan stepped out. He was wearing a dark jacket, no tie, his hands pushed into his pockets. The streetlight caught the edge of his face. You've been following me again, she said. Not following, waiting. For what? To make sure you got out okay. She stopped on the sidewalk. The distance between them was 10 feet. The street was quiet, the restaurant's valet stand empty at this hour. How did you know I was here? Your father posted a photo of the celebration on social media. Tagged the restaurant. You're monitoring my father's social media. Your father's social media is public, and he tags his location. Alex shrugged. It's not hard to connect dots. Evelyn walked toward him. He didn't move. I found something today, she said. I know. You know? The building superintendent called the afternoon doorman, said someone had picked up a key for Unit 4B. The doorman described a woman matching your general appearance, height, hair color, approximate age. He paused. Vanessa Vance's sister who lied about a delivery. So you know I broke into Marcus's apartment. I know you accessed a property that's part of an active federal investigation. And you're not going to stop me. He looked at her. The streetlight split his face into light and shadow. Would it work if I tried? No. Then I'm not going to waste my breath, but I am going to say this once. He stepped closer. The distance between them narrowed to 3 feet. You shouldn't be doing this alone. The evidence you found today, if Marcus finds out you have it, he'll come after you, not legally, personally. I can handle myself. I don't doubt that, but you don't have to. The words hit her in a place she had thought was sealed, welded shut by the years she had spent alone in her previous life. In every version of herself she had ever been, she had handled things alone, she had died alone, she had built this life, this second chance. Believing that alone was the only way to survive, Alex Chun kept showing up, not to control her, not to stop her, to stand beside her. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, she said. I know. And I'm not going to tell you everything. I know that too. Then why are you here? He held her gaze when he spoke. His voice was quiet enough that she had to lean in to hear. Because someone should be. He walked her to her car a few blocks away. At the driver's door, his hand touched her arm. A brief pressure, there and gone, the warmth of it lingering on her skin. If you're going to do something dangerous, he said, at least tell someone. I don't have anyone to tell. You have me. He stepped back and walked toward his own car without waiting for an answer. Evelyn stood at her door, the warmth of his hand still printed on her arm, and watched him drive away. The report arrived at 7:13 a.m. Evelyn was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her living room floor with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She had been awake since 5, replaying the hallway conversation with Marcus, trying to gauge how much he suspected. She hadn't reached a conclusion. Her phone buzzed. An email from Sarah Okonkwo, subject line, full report as promised, read this sitting down. Evelyn opened the attachment, 47 pages. Sarah had been thorough in a way that felt surgical. The report covered Marcus Sterling's financial history for the past 5 years, 6 shell companies registered across 3 states, Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming, each one a door into a larger network, 2 international accounts in jurisdictions that made financial privacy a selling point, A pattern of money movement that followed the same structure every time, like a signature. Clean money went in from legitimate sources, passed through the maze, and emerged cleansed on the other side. But at the heart of the report was a single page that made Evelyn's hands go cold. Page 32, asterisk authorized signatory list, Sterling Capital Associated Accounts, asterisk at the top of the list under the account number was Marcus Sterling's name. Beneath it, typed in the same font, the same formatting, was a second name, asterisk Vanessa Vance, asterisk. Evelyn read it 3 times. The words didn't change no matter how many times she blinked. Vanessa was an authorized signatory, not on the apartment lease, on an actual bank account, a financial account connected to Sterling Capital's operating network. Her sister had signing authority over money that was moving through Marcus's shell companies. She was not a victim. She was not a pawn who had been manipulated into signing a lease without understanding what it meant. She was a co-signatory on an account that had moved over $2 million. Evelyn set the phone face down on the floor. The coffee cup was cold in her hand. She set that down too. In her previous life, she had spent 2 years believing Vanessa was as deceived as everyone else. She had felt sorry for her sister, even after Vanessa had stopped speaking to her. Even as the distance between them grew into a chasm, she had died believing Vanessa was a victim of Marcus's manipulation, just another person he had used and discarded. She had been wrong. The grief arrived without warning, a squeeze in her chest, a pressure behind her eyes that she refused to release. She had prepared herself for the possibility that Vanessa was involved, but preparation and reality were different things. One was a thought exercise, the other was a 47-page report sitting on her living room floor. She picked up the phone and called Sarah, Ms. Vance. Page 32, the authorized signatory. How solid is this? As solid as bank records obtained through legal channels. Sarah's voice was calm, professional. Marcus Sterling added Vanessa Vance as a signatory on the account 14 months ago. The account has seen approximately $2,300,000 in transfers since that date. Did she know what she was signing? Ms. Vance, I can't tell you what was in your sister's mind when she signed those documents. What I can tell you is that the account requires one signature from the 2 authorized signatories to release funds below $50,000, and both signatures for amounts above that threshold. Your sister's signature has appeared on 9 separate transfers. 2 of those were above $50,000, requiring both her signature and Marcus Sterling's. 9 times Vanessa had put her name on documents that moved money through a network designed to hide its origin. 9 times she had chosen to sign. Thank you, Sarah, I'll be in touch. One more thing, Ms. Vance. Sarah paused. The largest transfer in the account, $1.2 million, occurred 3 days ago. It was authorized by both signatories, Marcus Sterling and Vanessa Vance. 3 days ago, before the engagement party, before Evelyn had confronted her sister at lunch and watched Vanessa's mask crack, Vanessa had signed a $1.2 million transfer before sitting across from Evelyn and pretending to be a confused fiancé who didn't know what her future husband was doing. Evelyn ended the call. She sat on the floor for a long time. The sun rose outside her window. The city woke up, cars passed on the street below. Birds sang in the tree outside her building. The world continued as if nothing had changed. Everything had changed. She waited until 10 a.m., then she called the one person she had been avoiding calling because once she told him she couldn't take it back. Alex. Evelyn. His voice sharpened immediately. What's wrong? I need to show you something, not in person, I'll send it, but I need you to keep my source's name out of any record. What is it? A PI report on Marcus Sterling's accounts. There's a name on the authorized signatory list that you need to see. Send it. She did. She redacted Sarah's name, address, phone number, and any identifying information from the document. She left the financial data intact. The redacted PDF landed in his inbox at 10:07 a.m. 23 minutes later, her phone rang. Vanessa Vance is an authorized signatory. Yes. On an account that's moved over $2 million through Sterling Capital's network. Yes. And you found this when? This morning. The report was delivered at 7:13. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She could hear him breathing, thinking, pulling the threads of this new information into the larger pattern he had been assembling for 6 months. Evelyn, this changes things. I know. Your sister is not just connected to Marcus Sterling, she is financially embedded in his operation. If this case goes to court, she could face charges. I know. Do you understand what I'm saying? She closed her eyes. The sunlight coming through her window was warm on her face. I understand. Then you also understand that I can't keep this out of my official report. I didn't ask you to. But you asked me to keep your source out of it. That means you have someone on the inside feeding you information, someone good. If they found this before my team did, yes. I won't ask who it is, a pause, but I need to know, are you planning to share everything you find with me? The question hung in the air between them. Trust. It always came back to trust. In her previous life she had trusted the wrong person. She had paid for it with everything. Her home, her family, her future, her life. In this life she had built walls of steel and silence, but Alex Chun kept finding the cracks she hadn't known were there. Yes, she said. I'll share what I can. Thank you. She was about to hang up when his voice came through again, softer than she had ever heard it. Evelyn, I know this isn't easy finding out about your sister. It's not. But you're doing the right thing, the harder thing, the thing most people wouldn't have the courage to do. She didn't answer because she wasn't sure what the right thing was anymore. The line between protecting her family and exposing them had blurred into something she couldn't see clearly. Alex. Still here. If Vanessa goes to prison, then she goes to prison. His voice was firm but not harsh. You're not the one putting her there. Marcus Sterling is the one who built this operation. She chose to sign those documents. She chose to be part of it. That's on her, not on you. The words were true, but they didn't feel like absolution. She ended the call and sat in the silence of her apartment, the phone still warm in her hand. For a long moment she didn't move. She thought about Vanessa at age 12, building forts in the backyard with blankets and clothespins. Vanessa at 16, crying on Evelyn's shoulder after her first heartbreak. Vanessa at 22, standing next to Evelyn at their grandmother's funeral, holding her hand so tightly that the knuckles went white. That Vanessa and the Vanessa who had signed 9 transfer authorizations felt like two different people. Evelyn didn't know when one had become the other. She didn't know if there had been a single moment, a single choice, or if it had been a slow erosion, 1,000 small compromises that had led her sister to a place where signing a $1.2 million transfer felt like a normal Tuesday. She would never know, and that might be the hardest part. She spent the afternoon at her kitchen table building a map. Sarah's data spread across the left side, the photographs from Unit 4B on the right. In the center, a timeline of transfers she had reconstructed from both sources, written out on a sheet of graph paper in her own handwriting. The pattern was clear now. Marcus had been building this infrastructure for years, long before he met Vanessa, long before he set his sights on Vance Holdings, the shell companies, the accounts, the authorized signatories, the apartment where documents were stored. Everything had been in place before he proposed. Vanessa had been added to the machine 14 months ago, not as a victim, as a cog, a signatory who made the machine run more smoothly, or as a partner. Evelyn didn't know which one was worse. At 4 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. I cross-referenced the evidence you sent with my existing data. The PI's material fills gaps I couldn't access through legal channels. I have enough for a warrant now. I'm going to wait. She stared at the screen. Why? Because if I move now, I can only catch the financial crimes. The stolen money won't be recovered. Your father's company won't get its assets back. Vanessa will be charged as an accomplice. If I wait until Marcus moves the larger Vance Holdings transfers, until he's fully committed to the scheme, I can build a case that seizes and recovers the assets. Your father gets his company back. Your sister's charges are reduced because she cooperates. But waiting means more money moves, more risk. If he gets spooked and runs, we lose everything. I need your opinion. Evelyn read the message 3 times. He was asking her to make a decision with him, not as a source dropping anonymous information, as someone whose judgment he trusted. She typed back, how long do you need? 3 weeks, maybe 4 if everything goes according to plan. Then wait. Are you sure? My father signed the deal yesterday. The first transfer is scheduled for next week. Marcus is going to move the money anyway. The only choice I have is whether the money comes back. She paused, then added, I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends. If we rush, let him dig his grave deeper. A long pause, then okay. 3 weeks. She set the phone down. Outside, the sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon. She had just made a decision that would shape the next 3 weeks of her life, and the lives of everyone she loved, for the first time since she had woken up in her childhood bedroom with the weight of a previous life pressing against her chest. She didn't feel like she was carrying it alone. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Alex, not about the case, not about Marcus or Vanessa or the money. Thank you for asking. His reply came a minute later. Always. 1 word. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but she read it twice before she locked the phone and set it face down on the table. The map was finished, the timeline was drawn, the plan was set. Now all she had to do was wait for Marcus to make the first move, and for Alex to be ready when he did. The transfer happened on a Tuesday, Evelyn knew because Sarah's monitoring system flagged it within 3 hours of the wire clearing. $500,000 from Vance Holdings operating accounts to a shell company called Horizon Capital, registered in Delaware 6 months ago by a lawyer whose name Evelyn now recognized from the documents in Unit 4B. The first domino had fallen. She sat at her kitchen table and watched the notification on her phone. The money had moved exactly as the timeline had predicted. Marcus was following his own script, unaware that someone had already read the final act. She had been waiting for this moment, not passively. She had been building while she waited. The morning after she had photographed the files in Unit 4B, she had made a call to a lawyer she had vetted through Sarah. Not the same lawyer who had set up Alder Lane Holdings, a different one specializing in asset acquisition. She had given him a list of shell companies from Marcus's network and asked him to identify which one was the linchpin, the entity that Marcus would need for the next phase of his operation to function. The answer came back in 48 hours, a company called Westbrook Partners. It held a key license that Marcus needed to move money through a legitimate channel. Without Westbrook, his next 3 transfers would be impossible to launder cleanly. Evelyn had bought Westbrook Partners for $2 million through Alder Lane Holdings. The purchase closed the same day Marcus initiated the first Vance Holdings transfer. She didn't own the whole company, she owned enough. A controlling share that gave her the right to block any transaction involving the license Marcus needed. The trap had a gap now, and Marcus didn't know it yet. The call came on Wednesday. Evelyn was at the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, when her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Something made her pick up. Ms. Vance, this is Robert Chun, Marcus Sterling, CFO. I'm calling because we've identified a discrepancy in an acquisition we're trying to close, and your name came up in connection with the holding company that now controls Westbrook Partners. Robert Chun, Marcus's CFO, the man who handled the operational side of the shell company network. I don't know what you're talking about, Evelyn said. Alder Lane Holdings, that's your company, isn't it? She said nothing. We're prepared to make you an offer for the shares you acquired, a generous one. Marcus would like to resolve this quietly. How generous? $2 million. For a purchase you made at 1.2, that's a quick $800,000 profit for doing nothing. In her previous life, Evelyn had never been offered $800,000 for doing nothing. She had never been offered anything by anyone with Marcus Sterling's name attached. She had been invisible, a woman to be stepped over on the way to the real target in this life. She had made herself visible in exactly the way that mattered. I'm not interested. I'm sorry. I said I'm not interested in selling. There was a pause. The CFO's voice cooled. Ms. Vance, I don't think you understand the situation. Westbrook Partners' license is critical to a transaction Marcus has committed to. If you block it, there will be consequences. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the reality of the situation. Evelyn picked up a tomato, examined it, placed it in her basket. Then let me explain the reality of mine. I own 53% of Westbrook Partners. The license you need requires a board vote to authorize any third-party transaction. I control the board, so unless Marcus wants to explain to his investors why his deal fell through because of a $2 million company owned by his fiancée's sister, I suggest he finds another way. There was silence on the line. Robert Chun had run out of scripts. He was a CFO who handled numbers, not a negotiator who handled women who refused to be intimidated. You're making a mistake, Ms. Vance. Probably, but it's my mistake to make. She hung up. The tomato went into her basket. She finished her shopping. When she walked out of the grocery store, her hands were shaking, but her voice had been steady. Alex called that evening. I heard you bought Westbrook Partners. News travels fast. Marcus's CFO has been on the phone all afternoon. He called 3 different lawyers trying to find a way to undo the sale. He couldn't. Good. She leaned against her kitchen counter. The evening light was fading through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I bought a company that Marcus needs. You bought the linchpin of his entire operation for the next 3 months. Without Westbrook, he can't clean the Vance Holdings money. He can't pay his investors. He can't close the deals he's already promised. You've put a wall in front of a moving train. Then the train will have to find another track, or it will derail. His voice was quiet. And when it does, everyone on board will go with it. She knew he was right. She had been thinking about that ever since she hung up on Robert Chun. The satisfaction of blocking Marcus had been immediate, but the weight of the consequences was settling in slowly, like sediment in still water. Every action she took sent ripples through a system she couldn't fully control. Blocking Westbrook meant Marcus would have to find another channel, a riskier one, a more desperate one, and desperate men made mistakes that hurt people who weren't part of the plan. I know, she said. But the alternative was letting him win, there was a pause, then, I'm not arguing with you, I'm making sure you understand what you've stepped into. I understand. Marcus's CFO is having a meltdown. He called my office trying to figure out if there was any way to legally challenge the purchase. Is there? No, you bought it clean, the sale was legitimate, the previous owner was happy to take your money. A pause. That was smart, Evelyn. It was necessary. You cost him a key piece of his operation, he doesn't know who you are yet, but he's going to figure it out. Let him. Evelyn, his voice shifted. I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying it because if Marcus connects you to Westbrook, he's going to come after you, not through lawyers, through whatever channels he has left. I know. Do. You have somewhere safe to stay. I have my apartment. That's not safe enough. It's all I have. He was quiet for a moment, then. Can you come to my office tomorrow? I want to show you something. What? Evidence I've been building, I think you should see the full picture. She agreed, not because she needed to see the evidence, she had her own copies of most of it, stored in the same encrypted folder that held the photographs from Unit 4B, but because he had asked and because the thought of sitting in a room with him, going through files, sharing the same air, felt less like a risk and more like the only thing she wanted to do. She arrived early and stood outside the federal building for 10 minutes, watching the lights in the windows, trying to name the feeling that had settled in her chest. It was not fear, it was not anticipation, it was something in between, a quiet hum, like a machine she hadn't known was running until it started. His office looked different at night. Evelyn arrived at 7 p.m. The federal building was mostly empty, the cubicles dark, the hallways lit by motion-activated lights that clicked on as she walked past. Alex was at his desk, sleeves rolled up, a half-eaten sandwich on a napkin beside his keyboard. Thanks for coming, he said. You said it was important. It is. He gestured to a chair beside his desk, not across from it, beside it. She sat down, the whiteboard in the corner had grown since her last visit. More names, more arrows. A timeline that stretched from one end to the other, marked with dates and dollar amounts and question marks that had since been filled in. Evelyn recognized her own contributions, the data from Sarah, the photographs from Unit 4B. They were integrated into his map now, indistinguishable from the information he had gathered through official channels. I've been building this case for 6 months, Alex said, standing beside her. When I started, I had 3 shell companies and a suspicion. Now I have 12 shell companies, 2 international accounts, a paper trail that connects Marcus Sterling to money laundering across 3 states, and a timeline that shows exactly how he planned to drain Vance Holdings. He picked up a marker and drew a circle around one of the entries. This is where you come in. Evelyn leaned closer. The entry was marked, Westbrook Partners, acquired by Alder Lane Holdings, Vance. You blocked his next phase, Alex said. Without Westbrook, he can't launder the next 3 transfers through his usual channel. He's going to have to either delay, find a new channel, or proceed with a higher risk of detection. Which means he's going to make a mistake. He's already rattled. His CFO called me today, not to report a crime, to ask if I had any information about a hostile acquisition of a business partner. He's scared. Evelyn looked at the board, the web of connections, the names and dates and dollar amounts. Her name was on it. Now, written in Alex's handwriting. How much longer? She asked. A week, maybe 2. Marcus is going to have to find a new channel for the next transfer. When he does, I'll have probable cause for a warrant. And if he doesn't, if he just stops, he won't. He's committed too much. The money has to move or his investors will start asking questions. He's trapped in his own plan. Evelyn nodded. She could feel the warmth of his presence beside her. Close enough that if she turned her head, she would see the fine lines at the corner of his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw. She turned her head. He was already looking at her. The distance between them was less than a handspan. She could see the rise and fall of his chest. She could see the way his hand tightened on the marker he was still holding. Evelyn. Alex. That was all. 2 names, spoken like a question neither of them was ready to answer. The air between them was thin, charged. She could feel the pull of gravity, the weight of the moment pressing down on both of them. He leaned in, or she did. It was impossible to tell which one moved first. His lips were a breath away from hers. She could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, could see the slight part of his mouth, the way his breath had gone shallow. Her own heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. She had not been touched. Not like this, not with this kind of intention. In 2 lifetimes, the pull toward him was gravitational, a force that bypassed logic and settled directly in her chest. 1 inch, that was all that separated them. His phone buzzed on the desk, a sharp, insistent vibration that cut through the air like a blade. The sound shattered the silence like glass. Alex flinched back, reaching for his phone. His expression was caught between frustration and relief. Relief because the interruption had saved him from a decision he might not have been ready to make. Marcus's building, he said, reading the screen. Motion alert on the surveillance feed. Evelyn exhaled. The moment was gone, but it had existed for 1 suspended second. Long enough for Evelyn to know that she had wanted it. Long enough to feel the absence of his lips like a physical ache. She walked to the door with her back straight and her breath shallow. And she did not look back because she knew if she did, she would not leave. But the memory of it, the heat of his presence, the way his gaze had dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, stayed with her like a brand. I should go, she said. Evelyn. She stopped at the door. What I said earlier, about you doing this alone, you're not anymore. She didn't turn around, but she nodded. Then she walked out into the empty hallway, the ghost of his nearness still warm on her skin. Vanessa showed up at her apartment the next morning. No call, no text, just a knock at 8 a.m. sharp and insistent, the kind of knock that said, I'm not leaving until you open the door. Evelyn opened it. Vanessa stood in the hallway in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had sat across from Evelyn at Harbor Grill. We need to talk? Evelyn stepped aside. Vanessa walked in, stopped in the middle of the living room and turned. Marcus says you bought a company that's blocking one of his deals. He told you that. He's furious. He's been pacing all night. I've never seen him like this. Evelyn closed the door. And you came here because you're worried about him. No, I came here because I'm worried about you. Vanessa's voice cracked. If he finds out it was you. He already knows it was me. His CFO traced the purchase to my holding company. Vanessa's face went pale. Evelyn, you need to stop. Stop what? Stop fighting him. He's not. You don't understand what he's capable of. Then tell me. The words hung between them. Vanessa's hands were shaking. She pressed them together, trying to still them. Vanessa, I know about the account. The color drained from Vanessa's face completely. She looked like she had been turned to stone. I know you're an authorized signatory. I know you've signed 9 transfers. I know you signed a $1.2 million transfer 3 days before your engagement party. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. How? I hired a PI before the engagement party, before you sat across from me at Harbor Grill and lied about the apartment. I didn't lie. You told me the apartment was for investor meetings. You didn't tell me you were a co-signatory on an account that's moved over $2 million through Marcus's shell companies. Vanessa sank onto the edge of the couch. Her hands were in her lap now, motionless. How long have you known? Long enough. Are you going to tell the police? I've already spoken to a federal investigator. Vanessa's head snapped up. You what? His name is Alex Chen. He's been investigating Marcus for 6 months. He has enough evidence to arrest him. He's waiting because I asked him to. Why would you do that? Because if he moves now, the money your fiancé stole from our family can't be recovered, and you'll be charged as an accomplice. Vanessa stared at her. Tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't seem to notice. I didn't know, she whispered. Not at first. When he asked me to sign the first one, he said it was for a business account, a joint account for our future. He said my name needed to be on it. Because it looked better for the bank. I believed him, Vanessa. I believed him, and then the money started moving and I asked him about it and he said it was investments, legitimate investments, and I wanted to believe him, so I did. The apartment, Vanessa, your name on the lease, the files in the living room. Vanessa's face crumpled. I didn't know about the files, I swear. He said the apartment was for privacy for us. He said he needed a place where he could work without distractions. When did you find out the truth? 3 months ago. I found a bank statement in his briefcase, a statement for an account I'd never seen before. I confronted him. He told me everything. Evelyn sat down across from her sister. The distance between them was 3 feet. It felt like a continent or an ocean, or the 2 years of silence that had separated them in her previous life. She looked at Vanessa, really looked at her, and saw the shadows under her eyes, the tremor in her hands, the way she had aged 5 years in the months since Marcus had entered her life. This was not a woman who had chosen evil with clear eyes. This was a woman who had chosen comfort, chosen denial, chosen to believe the story she was told because the truth was too terrible to face. Evelyn understood that better than anyone could know. And you stayed? I love him. He's a criminal. I know, Vanessa's voice broke. I know he is, but he told me it was almost over. He said if I just held on a little longer, the money would be in place and we could leave, start over somewhere else. Start over with our family's money. He said it was just business, that your father was going to make the same amount anyway, that it was a loan, not a theft. Evelyn looked at her sister, the woman who had built forts with her in the backyard, the woman who had held her hand at their grandmother's funeral, the woman who had signed her name to 9 transfers and told herself it was love. Vanessa, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Vanessa nodded. Do you want out? The silence stretched for 10 seconds, 15, 20. I don't know if I can. You can, but you have to choose right now. If you stay with Marcus, you go down with him. If you leave, I'll help you. Help me how? I have money, I have a lawyer. I have a federal investigator who's willing to reduce your charges if you cooperate. Vanessa looked at her. The tears had stopped, her eyes were red. But there was something else in them now. A flicker of the sister Evelyn remembered from childhood. The girl who had climbed trees and scraped her knees and never backed down from a dare. That girl was still in there somewhere, buried under years of wanting to be loved, wanting to be chosen, wanting to be enough for a man who would never be enough for anyone. What do you need me to do? Tell me everything, every account, every transfer, every promise Marcus made. Write it down, give it to me. And then you go to Alex Chun, you make a statement, and when this is over, you start over. Vanessa was quiet for a long time, then she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Evelyn didn't hug her, she couldn't, not yet. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too raw. Forgiveness was not a switch she could flip, but she reached across the space between them and took her sister's hand. Vanessa's fingers were cold, they trembled in Evelyn's grip, but she held on. Thank you, Vanessa whispered. Don't thank me yet, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I know. Are you sure? Vanessa squeezed her hand. For the first time in weeks, her smile was real. I'm sure, The call came that night. Evelyn was sitting in her car, parked on a side street near the waterfront. She didn't know why she had driven here. She had finished her conversation with Vanessa, had walked her sister to the door, had watched her drive away, and then she had gotten in her own car and driven east toward the water, toward the building that had become the center of everything. Her phone buzzed. Her father. Evelyn. Dad. I checked the accounts. His voice was different, hollow. $500,000 was transferred out this morning, to a company I've never heard of. I know. You know. Marcus Sterling is laundering money through our company. The $500,000 is the first transfer. He has a timeline that shows $47 million over 6 months. There was a long silence on the other end. How do you know this? Because I've been investigating him for 2 weeks, because I hired a PI, because I broke into an apartment he's been using to store documents, because I own the company he needs to complete his next transfer. Evelyn. I tried to tell you, Dad. I came to your office, I showed you the email about the apartment, you told me I didn't understand business. I know. His voice cracked. I know you did. She closed her eyes. In her previous life, she had longed to hear those words. She had wanted her father to acknowledge that she had been right, that he should have listened, that she wasn't the naive daughter everyone assumed she was in this life. The words felt like ash. What do we do now? He asked. We wait. The investigator needs more time to build a case that recovers the assets. If we move now, we catch Marcus but lose the money. If we wait, we get both. How long? A week, maybe 2. I trust you. 3 words. She had waited 2 lifetimes to hear them. I know, Dad, I know. She hung up and sat in the dark car. The phone warm in her hand, the building loomed in her windshield. 47 Harbor Lane, its windows dark, its secret still intact. The silence of the car was a cocoon. She had been here for 40 minutes, watching the dark windows of Unit 4B, trying to understand what she was waiting for. She was waiting for Marcus to appear, to give her a reason to call Alex and say it was time. She was waiting for herself to believe that her sister's confession would be enough. She was waiting for something she couldn't name. A knock on her window. She turned. Alex Chun was standing outside her car, his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked like he had been walking for a while. His hair was damp from the mist that had rolled in off the water. She unlocked the door. He opened it and slid into the passenger seat without asking, the leather creaking under his weight. The car was small, and his presence filled the space in a way that was not confining but grounding. You're here, she said. I was across the street watching the building. For how long? Couple of hours. And you just happened to see my car. He didn't answer, he didn't need to. They sat in silence, the dashboard lights cast a soft glow across his face. He didn't ask why she was here. He didn't fill the quiet with questions. She reached for him without thinking. Her fingers found his hand on the center console. She held on. He turned his hand over. His fingers laced through hers. The touch was light, barely there. But it was the most solid thing she had felt since she had woken up in her childhood bedroom. Minutes passed, 5, 10, she lost count. She leaned her head against his shoulder. His hand tightened around hers. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to in her previous life. She had sat in 1,000 dark rooms alone, waiting for something that never came in this life. She sat in a dark car with a man who had found her without being asked, who held her hand without demanding an explanation, who had crossed a street in the middle of the night because he had seen her car and wanted to be near her. She didn't know what would happen next. The trap was still closing. Marcus was still dangerous. Vanessa's confession was still unspoken. Her father's trust was still fresh and fragile. But in this moment, in this car, with Alex Chen's hand in hers, the weight of everything felt a little lighter. She closed her eyes. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. outside. The city hummed with the quiet energy of a night that belonged to no one inside the car. The world had shrunk to the space between two people who had found each other in the wreckage of someone else's plan. She did not know what this was. This thing growing between her and Alex Chen. She did not know if it was trust or gratitude, or the beginning of something she had never allowed herself to want, but she knew that his hand in hers felt like the first safe thing she had held in 2 lifetimes. Tomorrow she would fight again, the war with Marcus was not over. Vanessa had to write her statement. The money was still moving, the trap was still closing. Tonight, she let herself rest, and for the first time in either life, she did not rest alone. The call came at 6 a.m. Evelyn was already awake, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The photographs from Unit 4B were spread across the surface in careful rows. Bank statements, wire confirmations, incorporation documents. She had been organizing them by date, cross-referencing each piece of paper against Sarah Okonkwo's report, building a chronological map of Marcus Sterling's crimes. The timeline stretched across 3 feet of her kitchen table, held down by a coffee mug at one end and her phone at the other. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Evelyn Vance. Marcus's voice, not the warm, polished tone he used at dinner parties and family gatherings, something colder, sharper. The voice of a man who had stopped pretending. Marcus, I know what you've been doing. Which thing? The holding company, Westbrook Partners, the private investigator, the very interesting conversation you had with my CFO yesterday. A pause. You cost me a lot of money, Evelyn. I don't appreciate that. She set down her coffee, her hand was steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, it doesn't suit you. You're not the naive little sister everyone thinks you are. I figured that out the night of the engagement party when you stood in the corner and watched everyone like you were taking notes. He paused. I also know your sister came to see you yesterday. Evelyn's hand went still on the table. What did she tell you? Why don't you tell me? Vanessa and I had lunch, sisters talk. Vanessa and I had a conversation last night, a long one. His voice dropped. She told me everything, the PI, the apartment, the account, the statement she's preparing for your federal investigator. She cried when she told me, begged me to understand that she was doing it because she was scared. Evelyn said nothing. Her mind was moving too fast to form words, running through possibilities and countermoves and exits she couldn't see. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said. You're going to call your investigator and tell him the evidence was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a case of a protective sister who got the wrong idea. You're going to withdraw everything, and you're going to sell Westbrook Partners back to me at the price you paid for it. No profit, no loss, clean break. Or what? Or I'm going to make sure your father knows exactly how his daughter funded her little operation. His voice was calm now, almost conversational. The $200 million sitting in your holding company account, the lottery ticket you bought on July 11th, the careful trail of anonymous purchases you thought would keep you invisible. Evelyn's blood went cold. The temperature of the room dropped around her like a curtain falling. You think I didn't notice, he continued. You think I didn't have someone watching you from the moment you opened that account? I've been doing this for 10 years, Evelyn. I know every trick, every shell, every blind trust. You walked into my game and thought you could beat me because you bought a ticket and got lucky. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Alder Lane Holdings, opened 3 days after the July 11th lottery drawing. Initial deposit $200 million minus taxes, sole signatory Evelyn Marie Vance. He was enjoying this now, she could hear it in his voice, the pleasure of revelation of power. You've been playing a very dangerous game, Evelyn, and you forgot that I've been playing it longer. She hung up, her hands were shaking, she set the phone on the table and stared at it like it might explode. Marcus knew about the lottery money, he had known, not from the beginning, but he had figured it out, someone had traced the funds. A banker, a private investigator on his payroll, a contact at the State Lottery Commission who had leaked the winner's information. The how didn't matter, what mattered was that he knew, and if he knew, then Alex would find out too, not through Marcus, but through the same channels, the same paper trail, the same connections that had led Marcus to her doorstep. The walls she had built were cracking, and through the cracks, she could see the shape of everything she had been trying to protect. Slipping through her fingers, she picked up the phone, her fingers moved before her brain caught up, dialing a number she had memorized without meaning to. Alex. Evelyn, his voice sharpened immediately. It's 6 in the morning. Marcus knows about the money, about Alder Lane, about everything. There was a pause, she heard movement on the other end, the rustle of fabric, the click of a lamp being turned on. I'm coming over, comma. He arrived in 18 minutes, Evelyn counted. She opened the door before he could knock. He was standing in the hallway, jacket unzipped over a wrinkled shirt, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he had driven too fast and dressed too quickly. Tell me everything, he said. She let him in. They stood in her living room, the morning light just beginning to filter through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. She had not turned on any lights. The apartment was dim gray, the kind of light that made everything look like a photograph from an old camera. Marcus called me. He knows about the holding company. He knows about the lottery money. How? I don't know, but he knew the exact amount, the date of the deposit. He's been watching me longer than I realized. Alex's jaw tightened. His hands went to his hips. A gesture she had learned meant he was processing, holding himself back from saying something he might regret. Evelyn, I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth. She already knew what he was going to ask. She had known this question was coming since the moment she opened the bank account. She had prepared a dozen answers, a dozen deflections, a dozen walls she could build between herself and this moment. The $200 million, where did it come from? The walls crumbled. I won a lottery ticket, she said. 3 days before the engagement party, $200 million after taxes. I put it in a holding company account because I didn't want anyone to know it existed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. And now I'm telling you. He was quiet for a long moment. The silence in the room was thick, heavy, filled with everything they had not said to each other. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter. I've been investigating Marcus Sterling for 6 months. I have enough evidence to arrest him. I held back because you asked me to, because I believed in what you were doing, and because I trusted you. I put my career on the line for you. I know. You didn't trust me enough to tell me about $200 million sitting in an account that could be connected to Marcus Sterling's operation. It's not connected, it was clean money, legitimate, I paid taxes on it, it has nothing to do with Marcus. Marcus knows about it, that makes it connected. Alex, that money is the only reason I can do what I'm doing. It's the reason I could buy Westbrook Partners, it's the reason I could pay Sarah, it's the reason I have any power in this situation at all. And you couldn't tell me that. She had no answer because the real answer was too complicated, too tangled in the wreckage of her previous life. She had learned that trust was a vulnerability. Every time she had trusted someone, they had used it against her. Her father, Marcus, even Vanessa. In the end, the only person she could rely on was herself. That belief had carried her through her death and into this second life. Evelyn. His voice cracked. Not with anger, with something that looked like hurt. I thought we were building something, I thought you trusted me. I do trust you. Then why didn't you tell me? She opened her mouth to answer, closed it. There was no answer that would make sense to someone who hadn't lived her life, died her death, and woken up in her childhood bedroom with the weight of both worlds pressing against her chest. I don't know, she said finally. I don't know why I didn't tell you, maybe because I was scared that if you knew, you would see me differently, that you would treat me like a suspect instead of an ally, that the money would change how you looked at me. It wouldn't have. You don't know that. I know that I've been doing this job long enough to recognize the difference between someone hiding a crime and someone protecting themselves. Your account was clean, your purchase of Westbrook was legal, you didn't break any laws. But I didn't tell you. People keep secrets for a lot of reasons, not all of them are guilty. She looked at him. The morning light was brighter now, catching the dust motes floating in the air between them. Maybe I was scared that if I told you, I would have to admit that I can't do this alone. Can you? Do what? Do this alone. She looked at him. The morning light was growing stronger, catching the sharp lines of his face, the shadows under his eyes, the set of his jaw. No, she said. I don't think I can. He held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded. I have to go, he said. Alex. I need to think. He walked to the door. His hand was on the handle when he stopped. I'm not going to arrest you, that's not what this is, but I need you to understand something. Trust works both ways. You asked me to trust you and I did. I gave you everything I had and you held back the one piece of information that could have changed everything. I know. Right now, I don't know what we are. His voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know if we're partners or if I'm just a tool you're using to get what you want. You're not a tool. Then prove it. He left. The door closed behind him. The lock clicked. The silence that followed was louder than anything she had ever heard. Evelyn stood alone in her living room. The morning light falling across the floor in golden rectangles. She did not move. She stood exactly where he had left her. Her hands at her sides. The weight of his absence pressing against her chest like a stone she could not lift. She thought about following him, about running down the stairs and catching him in the lobby and saying something, anything, that would make him stay, but her feet would not move. She had told him the truth about the money. She had told him everything except the one truth that would make it make sense, and she did not know if that was enough. Outside, she heard a car engine start, tires on pavement, the sound of Alex Chun driving away. She sat down on the floor. The boards were cold beneath her. She sat there for a long time, the morning light moving across the floor, the silence wrapping around her like a shroud she had worn in her previous life and had never fully taken off. She sat on the floor for an hour. The apartment was silent, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic on the street below, the tick of the clock on the wall, a sound she had never noticed before, but now it was the only thing she could hear. The photographs from Unit 4B were still spread across the kitchen table. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. The morning light had shifted from gray to gold to the pale white of mid-morning. She had lost him, not in the way she had lost her family in her previous life, through betrayal and distance and the slow erosion of love. She had lost him by omission, by failing to trust the one person who had trusted her, fully and without reservation from the beginning. Her bag was on the floor beside the couch. She reached for it without looking. Her hand found the shape of the phone she had been carrying for 3 weeks, the one from her previous life, the one she had kept in a drawer since she woke up in her childhood bedroom. She had transferred her contacts to the new phone but had never deleted the old files. She had never had the courage to look at them. She had been waiting for a moment when she was strong enough to face what they contained. She turned it on. The screen glowed. The battery was at 40%. She opened the messages. The old texts were there. The last conversation she had had with her father before their relationship dissolved into silence. The last messages from Vanessa before she stopped answering. The final exchange with the family lawyer, who had told her there was nothing left. The company was gone, the assets were gone, the name Vance was worthless. She scrolled past them. She was looking for something older, something she had glimpsed in her previous life. A week before she died, an email chain between Marcus and her father, a conversation she had never fully seen but had never forgotten. She found it in a folder labeled Backup 2024. The folder name was meaningless. She had created it on a phone she no longer owned, in a year she no longer inhabited. Inside was a single screenshot. She had taken it herself on a borrowed phone in her father's office, on the day she had gone to beg him one last time to listen. He had left his computer unlocked while he took a call in the hallway. She had seen the subject line, final terms, Sterling acquisition. Without thinking, she had picked up her phone and taken a picture. She had never confronted him with it. She had been too afraid of what it meant. She opened the image. The text was small, pixelated. She zoomed in. Richard, as discussed, the 47 million will move through the channels we agreed upon. Your share is in place. The conditions you requested have been met. Marcus, She read it again. Your share, The conditions you requested, Her father had known, not after the fact, not too late to stop it. He had known before the deal was signed. He had negotiated terms. He had asked for conditions. He had made a deal with Marcus Sterling. A deal that gave Marcus access to Vance Holdings assets in exchange for something, a share, a payout, a promise that Richard Vance would not be left behind when the House of Cards collapsed. She scrolled to the second screenshot she had forgotten she took, Richard. Evelyn is asking questions. I need you to keep her out of the office. If she sees the transfer documents, she'll understand the structure. Marcus understood. She won't be a problem. Richard Evelyn stared at the words until they blurred and reformed and blurred again. In her previous life, she had spent 2 years believing she was naive. She had believed she was too blind to see what everyone else saw. She had carried the guilt of her family's collapse on her shoulders like a cross, convinced that if she had just been smarter, more observant, more involved, she could have stopped it. She had died believing she was stupid. The truth was worse, she had not been blind, she had been deliberately kept in the dark. Her father had not been deceived by Marcus. He had partnered with him, negotiated with him, made terms with him. He had signed the agreement knowing exactly what it was, and when Evelyn had come to him, begging him to wait, to check the contracts, to be careful, he had told her she didn't understand business. He had told her to stay out of it because she was in the way. The false belief she had carried for 2 lifetimes crumbled in a single moment, the wall she had built around her guilt collapsing into dust. She was not naive, she was not stupid, she had not deserved what happened to her. She had been sacrificed. Her father had chosen Marcus over her. He had chosen profit over his daughter. He had believed he could outsmart a criminal, and he had been wrong. And when it all fell apart, when Marcus took everything and vanished, Richard Vance had let his daughter carry the weight of the collapse while he sat in his empty house and said nothing. Evelyn set the phone down on the floor beside her. She was not crying, she was past crying. She sat on the hardwood floor of her apartment, a dead woman holding the proof of her own innocence, and felt something break inside her chest. But the breaking was not destruction, it was release. She had spent 2 lifetimes believing she was the one who had failed. The truth was that she had never been given a chance to succeed. She walked to Alex's office. She didn't call first, she didn't text. She took a cab through the morning traffic, the old phone clutched in her hand like a weapon, and walked into the Federal Building with the same steady steps she had used to walk into 47 Harbor Lane. The security guard recognized her. He waved her through without asking for her ID. She found Alex in his office, standing at the whiteboard, a marker in his hand. His back to the door, he turned when she walked in. His expression was guarded, the same look he had worn when he left her apartment. "Evelyn, I need to show you something." She placed the phone on his desk. The screenshot was still open, the text sharp and clear on the screen. He looked at the image. She watched his face as he read it, the shift in his expression from resistance to recognition to something she couldn't name. "This is Marcus communicating with your father." "Yes." "Before the deal was signed?" "Yes." "Your father knew?" "Yes." He looked up, his eyes met hers. "And you found this when?" "In my previous life." The words hung in the air between them. She had not planned to say it. The words had come out without permission, pulled from the deepest part of her by the weight of everything she had been carrying. Alex set the phone down. His full attention was on her. Not as an investigator, not as a federal agent, but as a man who was about to hear something he might not be able to explain. "I know this is going to sound impossible," she said, "but I need you to listen." "I'm listening. I remember everything." Her voice was steady. "Not in the way people say they remember things. I remember a version of my life that already happened. In that version, Marcus married Vanessa, drained Vance Holdings, and disappeared. My father lost everything. My mother sold the house. Vanessa vanished, and I died alone in a rented room above a laundromat. It took 3 days for anyone to find my body." Alex didn't speak, he didn't move, his hands were still at his sides, his gaze fixed on her face. "I woke up 3 weeks ago in my childhood bedroom. I had the full weight of that other life in my chest. Every mistake, every missed sign, every moment I wished I could take back. And I had 3 days before the lottery drawing that I had memorized in my previous life, so I bought a ticket. I won $200 million. And I started building the defenses I should have built the first time." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you asked me why I didn't trust you." She took a breath. "And the answer is because in my previous life trust cost me everything. I trusted Marcus, I trusted my father. I trusted that if I was a good person and did the right things, everything would work out. It didn't. I died believing I had failed everyone. Evelyn, but I also didn't have you in my previous life." Her voice cracked for the first time. "I didn't have someone who looked at me like I was worth seeing. I didn't have someone who crossed a street in the middle of the night because he saw my car and wanted to be near me. I didn't have someone who held my hand and told me I didn't have to do it alone." He stepped closer, the distance between them closed to inches. "I think," she said, "that might have made all the difference." He looked at her for a long time. The fluorescent lights hummed above them. The whiteboard behind him was covered in names and arrows and dollar amounts. the evidence of a crime that spanned years and states and the lives of everyone she loved. But in this moment none of it existed, there was only the space between them, and the truth she had finally spoken. Evelyn, his voice was rough. Do you understand what you're asking me to believe? Yes. And you understand that if I put this in my report, I'll lose my job. I don't need it in your report, I just needed you to know. He was quiet for a moment, then he reached out. His hand found hers, his fingers laced through hers the same way they had in the car, but this time the touch was different, deliberate, a choice. Earlier, he said. When I left your apartment, I wasn't angry about the money. What were you angry about? I was angry because I thought I had misread you, I thought we had something real, and the money made me question everything. He shook his head. But that was my own fear talking, not you. I understand if you need time. I don't need time. He stepped closer. I don't care where the money came from, I care about you. I care that you've been carrying this alone for 2 lifetimes. I care that you trusted me enough to tell me the truth, even when the truth sounded impossible. She didn't answer, she couldn't, the words were trapped somewhere between her chest and her throat, held back by years of learning not to say them. He pulled her into his arms. His arms closed around her. Steady, solid, warm, she felt the beat of his heart. Against her cheek, the rise and fall of his breathing, the solid weight of his presence around her. And for the first time since she had woken up in her childhood bedroom, Evelyn Vance let herself be held. The tears came without warning. Not the quiet tears she had held back in her previous life. The ones she had swallowed down until they became stones in her chest. These were different, they were release, they were the grief of 2 lifetimes. Finally finding a way out. He didn't tell her it was. Okay, he didn't say the words people said when they didn't know what else to do. He just held her, his hand moving in slow circles on her back, his chin resting on the top of her head. I thought I had to do this alone, she whispered against his chest. You don't? What if I fail? Then you fail and you get back up and you try again and I'll be there for both. She pulled back just enough to look at him, his face was close enough that she could see the moisture in his eyes, the slight tremor in his jaw. I always will. She did not kiss him, the moment was not for kissing, it was for something deeper. A promise made without words, sealed in the space between 2 people who had found each other in the wreckage of someone else's plan. But she held his hand, and when she finally left his office, the screenshot of her father's betrayal still glowing on his desk, she knew that whatever happened next, she would not face it alone. The boardroom was silent when Marcus Sterling walked in. Evelyn had arrived 40 minutes early to arrange the table. The photographs went in chronological order, left to right, first transfer to last. The binder went at her right hand, tabbed and indexed. Her laptop was open to a spreadsheet that showed every dollar that had moved through Marcus's network, color-coded by Shell Company. She had worn a dark blue suit, the same one she had worn to her grandmother's funeral in her previous life. It was armor, she had decided, the kind of armor that did not look like armor at all. It was the only expensive thing she owned that had survived both lifetimes. She wore it today because it made her feel like she deserved to be in this room. He was wearing a navy suit, perfectly pressed, his hair swept back, his watch catching the overhead lights like a beacon. He looked like a man who owned every room he entered, who had never lost anything in his life, who walked through doors expecting them to open. He stopped when he saw the table. Evelyn sat at the far end, not her father's usual seat. She had never sat at this table in her life, but today she sat at the head, her hands folded in front of her, the photographs from Unit 4B arranged in neat rows beside her laptop. The evidence she had gathered over 3 months was now organized in a binder that sat closed at her right hand. To her right sat Alex Chun in a dark suit and tie, a leather folder closed in front of him. He was not looking at Marcus, he was looking at Evelyn, and the look in his eyes was not professional. It was something quieter, something that said I'm here. To her left sat a woman in a gray jacket with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. Assistant U.S. Attorney Diane Reyes, who had reviewed the evidence, signed the warrant, and cleared her schedule for this moment. Marcus's gaze moved across the table. He saw the photographs of his own documents. He saw Alex Chun, the investigator he had dismissed as a minor inconvenience. He saw the federal prosecutor, and in that moment something behind his eyes shifted. The calculation that never stopped. Running adjusted for a variable he had not accounted for. Evelyn. His voice was calm, controlled. I thought this was a board meeting. It is, she said. The board of Vance Holdings, I'm the majority shareholder as of this morning. She said it flatly, without triumph. The transfer had been executed at 8 a.m. Alder Lane Holdings had purchased the controlling shares her father had put up as collateral for a loan Marcus had arranged through one of his shell companies. It was a loan Marcus had intended to call in today, triggering a fire sale that would have given him control of the company. He had called the meeting himself, thinking it would be the day he took everything. He had walked into a room where everything was already gone. "You can't do that," he said. "I already did. The papers are filed with the state, the shares are registered in the name of Alder Lane Holdings. The purchase was funded with legally sourced capital that has been fully documented and disclosed." Marcus looked at Alex, his composure was cracking at the edges, a flicker in his jaw, a tightening around his eyes. "This is a civil matter, you have no jurisdiction here." Alex didn't answer. He opened the leather folder and slid a single document across the polished mahogany table. "This is a federal warrant for your arrest, Mr. Sterling, signed by a federal judge. Charges include wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, and obstruction of justice." Marcus didn't look at the document. He kept his eyes locked on Alex's face. "You have no evidence. Everything I've done is within legal boundaries. My lawyers have reviewed every transaction. I have 6 shell companies registered across 3 states, Alex said, his voice flat and professional. "I have 2 international accounts in jurisdictions that are currently cooperating with our investigation. I have a signed lease on an apartment at 47 Harbor Lane, Unit 4B, that you have been using to store financial records. Relating to your operation, I have 9 authorized transfers signed by your fiancée Vanessa Vance, who has provided a sworn statement detailing your instructions to her." He paused. Marcus said nothing. "I have a timeline," Alex continued, "that shows exactly how you plan to drain $47 million from Vance Holdings over 6 months. I have bank records that trace the first $500,000 that moved on schedule, and the $3 million that followed, and I have documentation showing that you attempted to purchase an asset, Westbrook Partners, through coercive means when your initial acquisition failed." Marcus's expression did not change, but his hand, resting on the back of the chair in front of him, tightened almost imperceptibly. "I also have a statement from Richard Vance," Alex said. "He has admitted to knowing the nature of your operation and to participating in negotiations for a share of the proceeds. He has cooperated fully with our investigation in exchange for reduced charges." The name landed like a stone in still water. Marcus's hand stopped moving. "Richard confessed." "He did." Marcus turned to look at Evelyn, the mask he had worn for months, the warm, charming future son-in-law, the sharp businessman, the man who had her mother eating out of his hand, was gone. What remained was the face of a man who had been beaten at his own game. "Vanessa and your father," he said. "That's your hand. That's my evidence. You've been planning this since before the engagement party. I've been planning this since before I knew your name." He stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air in the boardroom was still, charged with the weight of everything that had led to this moment. "You think you've won," he said. "I think the evidence speaks for itself. $47 million in planned transfers, 6 months of documented money movement, 2 witnesses who have placed you at the center of a conspiracy to defraud this company. This isn't over. I have connections, lawyers, resources you can't imagine. I don't need to imagine them. I've already documented them." She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. "Your connections include a senior partner at Whitfield and Ross who has been receiving monthly payments from a Sterling Capital account. Your lawyers include 3 firms that have represented shell companies in your network. Your resources are currently frozen under a court order that was issued this morning." She opened the folder. Inside was a single page, a summary prepared by Sarah Okonkwo, showing the full extent of Marcus's network in one clean diagram. Horizon Capital, North Star Holdings, Bellwether Partners, Westbrook Partners, Alder Lane Holdings. She paused. "I own that one, the one that blocked your acquisition of Westbrook, the one that cost you 3 weeks and forced you to use a riskier channel for your $3 million transfer." Marcus's jaw tightened. The composure he had maintained since walking into the room was beginning to crack. "That transfer was the one that gave us probable cause," Alex said. "Before that, we had evidence of planning but not execution. Once the money moved through the unapproved channel, we had you." "You set a trap," Marcus said. His voice was flat. "I built a wall," Evelyn said. "You chose to climb over it." She set the folder on the table. "I've been thorough, Marcus. You taught me that." Assistant U.S. Attorney Reyes stood. Her voice was calm, practiced, the voice of someone who had done this many times before. Marcus Sterling, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. The doors opened, 2 federal marshals stepped in, their uniforms crisp, their faces neutral. Marcus did not resist. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and straightened his tie. The gestures were automatic, the habits of a man who cared about appearances even when the appearance no longer mattered. He turned to face Evelyn one last time. His expression was unreadable, neither anger nor defeat, but something in between. You were never the one I should have been watching, he said. It was not a threat, it was not an apology, it was an acknowledgement. The closest thing to a concession that a man like Marcus Sterling could make. I know, she said. The marshals took his arms and led him out. His shoes echoed on the marble floor of the hallway. The sound faded, the door closed, the boardroom was silent. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her hands still folded, the photograph still arranged in neat rows, the binder still closed at her right hand. She did not move, she did not speak. The weight of 3 months, of 2 lifetimes, pressed against her chest. But she did not let it show. Behind her, Alex's hand found her shoulder, a single point of contact, warm, steady. It's over, he said. She looked down at her hands. They were not shaking. In her previous life, she had trembled through every confrontation, her voice small, her certainty fragile. In this life, she had learned to sit still and let the truth do the work. Not yet, she said. But it will be. She stood, the chair slid back. She looked at the empty doorway where Marcus Sterling had stood, where his empire had ended, where she had finally closed the circle that had opened when she woke up in her childhood bedroom. Let's go clean up the rest. She walked out of the boardroom without looking back. The photographs remained on the table, the evidence of everything Marcus had tried to take. She would collect them later, file them away, keep them for the trial. Alex fell into step beside her. His presence was quiet, steady, the same way he had stood beside her through every moment of this journey. In the hallway, the assistant U.S. attorney was on the phone, coordinating with the team that was executing the search warrant on Sterling Capital's main office. The elevator doors opened. Evelyn stepped inside. Where to? Alex asked. Downstairs. There's a press conference I need to give. You don't have to do that today. Yes, I do. If I don't tell the story, someone else will tell it for me. The elevator descended. The floors ticked past. When the doors opened on the ground floor, the lobby was full of reporters who had gathered outside the glass doors. Evelyn walked toward them. Her heels were steady on the marble floor. Behind her, Alex stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. She stepped up to the microphone that someone had set up on a podium. The cameras flashed. The questions came in a wave. Voices overlapping, each reporter trying to be the first to ask the question that would break the story open. She raised one hand. The questions stopped, not because she was loud, but because she was calm. In a room full of noise, stillness commanded attention. My name is Evelyn Vance, she said. And I'm here to tell you what really happened to Vance Holdings. She spoke for 11 minutes. She laid out the timeline clearly, the engagement, the partnership agreement, the transfers, the investigation. She named Marcus Sterling as the architect of the fraud. She named her father as a participant who had cooperated with authorities. She did not name Vanessa. When she finished, a reporter asked the question she had been waiting for. Ms. Vance, how did you know? What made you suspicious when no one else was? She looked at the cameras. For a moment she thought about the answer. The truth, that she had lived this before, had died because of it, had been given a second chance she did not deserve and had chosen to use it differently this time. I paid attention, she said. Sometimes that's all it takes. She stepped away from the microphone. The questions continued behind her, but she did not turn back. She had said what she needed to say. The rest was for the courts to decide. 3 months later, Evelyn Vance stood at the window of her new office and watched the city turn gold. The office was on the 32nd floor of the Vance Holdings building, the corner suite that had once belonged to her father, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the river and the bridges and the skyline she had spent her whole life taking for granted. She had not taken the office out of ambition. She had taken it because the company needed someone at the helm, and she was the only person left who understood how all the pieces fit together. The months since Marcus's arrest had been a blur of depositions, asset recovery hearings, and board meetings. The news coverage had been relentless for the first 2 weeks. Former CEO's daughter saves company from fiancé's fraud scheme. But the headlines had faded as newer stories took their place. The Vance Holdings name had taken a hit in the press, but the business itself was solid. The assets that Marcus had moved were being recovered. 41 million of the 47 had been traced and frozen within the first month. The remaining 6 million was still being chased through an international account in a jurisdiction known for making things difficult. But the lawyers were optimistic. Her father had been charged with conspiracy. He had not fought the charges in his statement to the court. He had said he believed he could control Marcus, that he had made a deal with a devil he thought he could outsmart. He had been wrong. The judge had given him 3 years of probation and a fine that stripped him of his remaining assets. The house, the investments, the retirement accounts he had spent 30 years building. He was living in a smaller house now, in a neighborhood he had never heard of before the trial. He called Evelyn once a week. She answered every third call. The conversations were short, careful, the words of two people who had spent a long time not understanding each other and were still learning how to try. Vanessa had testified against Marcus. Her cooperation had earned her a reduced sentence, 2 years of probation and a requirement to complete financial ethics training. She had moved to the West Coast at the beginning of the second month. She sent Evelyn a postcard from Seattle with a single sentence, "I'm starting over, I hope you can too." Evelyn had kept the postcard in her desk drawer. She had not replied, but she had read it 12 times. Her mother had been the hardest to reach. Margaret Vance had spent 6 months planning a wedding for her younger daughter and a man who had been arrested for fraud. The shame of it had sent her into a spiral of denial and grief that she was only now beginning to climb out of. She had stopped asking about Marcus. She had started asking about Evelyn, small questions, tentative ones, like a woman testing a bridge she was not sure would hold. Evelyn answered the questions. She did not offer more than was asked, but she was there. Her father had been the most complicated. Richard Vance had spent 30 years building a company, and he had lost it in 6 months because he had believed he was smarter than a criminal. In his final statement to the court, he had said, "I thought I could control him. I thought I was the one in charge. I was wrong." Evelyn had visited him once in the small house he was renting now. They had sat on a patio with plastic furniture and looked at a yard that needed mowing. "I'm sorry," he had said, not for the deal with Marcus, for telling her she didn't understand business, for sending her away when she had been the only one who saw the truth. She had nodded. She had not said, "I forgive you." She was not there yet, but she had stayed for an hour, and when she left, she had told him she would come back. Margaret Vance had spent 6 months planning a wedding for her younger daughter and a man who had been arrested for fraud. The shame of it had sent her into a spiral of denial and grief that she was only now beginning to climb out of. She had stopped asking about Marcus. She had started asking about Evelyn, small questions, tentative ones, like a woman testing a bridge she wasn't sure would hold. Evelyn answered the questions. She did not offer more than was asked, but she was there. The door behind her opened. She did not turn. "You're late," she said. "I stopped for coffee." Alex Chen's voice was warm, familiar, the sound of something that had become as constant as the sunrise. "And I got held up at the security desk. Your new receptionist didn't believe I was a friend of the CEO. Did you convince her?" "I showed her my federal badge. She was very impressed." Evelyn turned. He was standing in the doorway, a paper cup in each hand, wearing a gray jacket and the same crooked smile he had worn the first time he walked into her life. The morning she had been opening a bank account she thought no one would find. He crossed the room and handed her a cup, black coffee, no sugar. "You remembered?" "I always remember." They stood at the window side by side, looking out at the city. The sky was a gradient of orange and pink and purple, the kind of sunset that made you believe in endings that were not sad. The river caught the light like a ribbon of gold. The bridges stretched across it, connecting one side to the other, carrying people home. "It's strange," she said. "I spent so long planning for this, building the defenses, setting the traps. I never thought about what would come after." "What does come after?" he asked. She considered the question. The city spread out below them, a grid of lights and lives and stories she would never know. Somewhere out there, Marcus Sterling was in a federal detention center awaiting trial. Somewhere out there, her father was sitting in a small house with a yard that needed mowing. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was unpacking boxes in a city she had chosen for herself, and she was here in an office she had earned with a man who had seen her at her most guarded and had stayed. "I don't know," she said. "For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I don't know what comes next." He smiled. "That sounds like freedom." "It sounds like terrifying." "Same thing most of the time." She thought about it. The company was running well, better than it had under her father if she was honest. The staff had accepted her leadership, slowly at first, then with growing confidence as they realized she knew what she was doing. She had let go of 2 executives who had been part of Marcus's network and promoted 3 women from middle management who had been waiting for someone to see their potential. Her mother had stopped calling to cry about the house. She had started taking painting classes and had sent Evelyn a photograph of her first landscape, a clumsy watercolor of a tree that looked more like a vegetable but was unmistakably an attempt at joy. Vanessa was in Seattle working at a small bookstore and sending postcards from every neighborhood she explored. She had not mentioned Marcus in any of them. Her father was learning to live with the consequences of his choices. He called, and Evelyn answered sometimes, and they were both learning that love could survive mistakes even when trust could not. And she was here, in an office she had never expected to occupy, holding a cup of coffee that a federal investigator had brought her because he remembered how she took it. Standing beside a man who had crossed a street in the middle of the night because he saw her car and wanted to be near her. "I don't know," she said. "That's the first time I've said that in 3 months. Good. Means you're finally living in the present, not the past, not the future you're trying to prevent." He set his coffee down on the windowsill. "I've been waiting 3 months to do this." He turned to face her. His hand came up to her face, his fingers brushing a strand of hair away from her cheek with a gentleness that made her breath catch. The touch was light, tentative, a question he was asking with his hands because he had never been good at finding the right words. "Alex, Evelyn." He leaned in, she met him halfway. The kiss was soft at first, gentle, the kind of kiss that said, "I have been thinking about you for months." In the quiet moments between cases, in the hours when I should have been sleeping, it deepened slowly the way trust deepens, not all at once but by degrees, by the weight of every moment that had led to this one. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, her eyes were closed. She could feel the beat of his heart through his chest, a rhythm that matched her own, steady and sure. "I used to think home was a place," she said. "A house, a family, a version of my life that I could go back to if I just tried hard enough." He waited. His hand was still on her cheek, his thumb tracing a slow arc across her skin. "But I don't think that anymore." "What do you think?" She opened her eyes. His face was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the way his breath caught when she looked at him. In her previous life, she had never looked at anyone this way, she had never let herself. "I think home is this, right here with you." He kissed her again, slower this time, a promise sealed without words, in the warm light of a city that was turning gold around them. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside the glass office on the 32nd floor, Evelyn Vance, who had died alone in a rented room above a laundromat, who had woken up in her childhood bedroom with the weight of 2 lifetimes on her chest, who had built walls so high that no one could reach her, finally let them fall. She was home. They stood at the window for a long time after the kiss, watching the colors deepen and fade. The city lights began to blink on, one by one, like stars emerging in reverse. The coffee had gone cold, but neither of them reached for it. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, she said finally. "I know. Will you be here when I'm done?" He smiled. It was the same smile he had given her in the coffee shop, the first time he had walked into her life and asked her name. "I always will, asterisk 3 years later. The portrait on the wall of the Vance Holdings lobby was replaced. The old one showed Richard Vance, founder and CEO, standing in front of the building with his arms crossed and his jaw set. The new one showed Evelyn Vance, chairman of the board, standing at the same spot with the same building behind her. But she was not alone, asterisk, a man stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, his head turned slightly toward her as if he had been mid-sentence when the photograph was taken. He was not in the company records, he was not on the board, he was listed nowhere in the corporate filings, he was just there, a quiet presence in the corner of the frame, the kind of person you might not notice until you looked twice, asterisk, and when you looked twice, you saw the way she leaned toward him, almost imperceptibly, like a compass needle finding north, asterisk, the plaque beneath the portrait read, Evelyn Vance, chairman, and beneath that, in smaller letters, "She built a life from nothing, she rebuilt it from less, she did not do it alone, asterisk, it was the only acknowledgement the company ever made of the woman who had saved it, and it was exactly the acknowledgement she would have wanted, asterisk, on the desk in her office, in the top drawer beneath a stack of financial reports. Evelyn kept 2 items from her 2 lives. The first was the old phone with the screenshots of her father's emails, the proof that she had been innocent all along. The second was a business card, worn at the edges, with a handwritten note on the back, asterisk, "I always will, Alex asterisk comma asterisk she read it every morning before she started work, asterisk comma asterisk and every evening when she left the office. He was waiting asterisk. If this story kept you listening until the end, subscribe to Warm Era. The next romantic revenge story is already waiting.